The first bell of the day rang, signaling the beginning of another typical high school morning. Jamal adjusted his backpack, letting it settle on his shoulders as he stepped into the crowded hallway. His heart beat faster as he moved through the throng of students, all chatting with friends, laughing, and heading to their respective classes. Jamal had always been a quiet kid, never one for small talk, never the life of the party. He preferred to stay on the outskirts of things, observing rather than engaging. But today felt different. Maybe it was the sense of something unknown hanging in the air, or maybe it was just his anxiety playing tricks on him. Either way, Jamal couldn't shake the feeling that today would be anything but ordinary. He walked into the cafeteria, scanning the sea of faces for an empty seat. His eyes locked onto a table near the back, where a few students were scattered, talking and laughing. He made his way toward it, hoping to blend in quietly and avoid drawing any unnecessary attention. But, as he neared the table, a loud voice cut through the chatter of the room. "Well, well, well. What do we have here?" Jamal froze. A familiar figure stepped forward, blocking his path. Tyler. Tyler was the kind of guy everyone knew. He was loud, brash, and, unfortunately, the school bully. He had an entourage of friends who followed him everywhere, laughing at his jokes, egging him on, and rarely questioning his actions. Jamal had heard the rumors about Tyler, how he picked on anyone who didn't fit in, anyone who looked different, or anyone he thought was an easy target. Jamal had hoped he'd be able to fly under the radar, but clearly, Tyler had other plans. Tyler flashed a smirk as he took a step closer, his eyes scanning Jamal from head to toe. "New kid, huh? What's your name?" he sneered, his tone dripping with mockery. Jamal shifted uncomfortably, his hand tightening around the straps of his backpack. "Jamal," he said softly, trying to keep his voice steady. "Jamal, huh?" Tyler repeated, rolling the name off his tongue as if he were tasting something sour. "Well, Jamal, I think you're gonna fit right in around here." Jamal knew where this was headed. He'd been the target of bullies before, at his old school. In fact, every year had been the same. A new school year meant new faces, new challenges, and most importantly, new bullies. Tyler, however, seemed different. His presence was more menacing, his confidence more assured. Tyler gestured toward the group of students at his table. "Come sit with us, man. I'm sure we can show you how things really work around here." His friends chuckled, clearly enjoying the spectacle of Jamal being put on the spot. Jamal hesitated. He didn't want to cause a scene, didn't want to draw more attention to himself. But he also didn't want to be part of whatever game Tyler was playing. He thought about the advice his father, Vin Diesel, had given him just last night. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone, Jamal. Your worth doesn't come from fitting in with others. It comes from who you are and how you treat people." Jamal took a deep breath, pushing the doubt out of his mind. He wouldn't let Tyler control him. He wasn't here to be anyone's target. "I think I'll pass," Jamal replied, his voice calm but firm. Tyler's smile faltered for a split second before he regained his composure. "Oh, come on. Don't be shy. I promise we're all friendly." His voice dripped with sarcasm, and the laughter from his friends intensified. Jamal stood his ground, looking Tyler directly in the eyes. He wasn't going to be intimidated. "No thanks," he said, turning his back on Tyler and walking away. As he walked past the table, he could feel the eyes of the students on him, their stares burning into his back. But he didn't look back. He kept his eyes straight ahead, focusing on the path in front of him. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing him stumble. Just as he was about to reach the door to the next hallway, Tyler's voice rang out again. "You think you're better than us, don't you?" Tyler shouted. His voice was loud enough that it caught the attention of several students nearby. Jamal didn't stop. He didn't even flinch. But the words stung nonetheless. It wasn't the first time someone had tried to make him feel inferior, but that didn't mean it didn't hurt. His mind raced, but he quickly pushed the thoughts aside. He couldn't afford to get caught up in the drama. His phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him out of his thoughts. He pulled it out and saw a message from his father, Vin Diesel. "How's your first day going, son? Remember to stay true to who you are. No one else can define you but you." Jamal smiled to himself. His dad's words always had a way of grounding him, reminding him that he was stronger than any of the petty things that happened at school. As the day wore on, Jamal kept his head down and avoided Tyler as best as he could. It wasn't easy, especially when Tyler seemed determined to make Jamal his personal project. But Jamal had learned to stay out of the spotlight, to avoid confrontation when possible. The bell rang again, signaling the end of lunch. Jamal gathered his things and walked out of the cafeteria, his mind still swirling with thoughts of Tyler. He couldn't understand why Tyler had chosen him as his target. Jamal had done nothing to provoke him, nothing to stand out. As he made his way toward his next class, he overheard snippets of conversation from other students. Whispers filled the hallways, about the new kid, the quiet kid, the one who didn't seem to care about fitting in. Some students seemed genuinely curious about him, while others, like Tyler's group, looked at him with disdain. But Jamal didn't let it bother him. He had bigger things to focus on, things like surviving high school and not letting the cruelty of others define who he was. He wasn't about to let Tyler or anyone else knock him off his course. Yet, deep down, Jamal knew this was just the beginning. Tyler wouldn't stop. He was going to make Jamal's life a living hell, and it was only a matter of time before the bully's relentless pursuit would push Jamal to his limits. And maybe that was exactly what Tyler wanted, a fight, a reason to make Jamal prove himself. But Jamal wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. Not today. Not ever. As he entered his next class, Jamal took a seat near the back, hoping to blend in and avoid any more attention. But as he sat down, he couldn't shake the feeling that the storm that was coming was bigger than he'd ever imagined. He wasn't just the new kid anymore. Now, he was the target. And the hardest part was just beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Jamal sat silently at the back of the classroom, trying his best to ignore the whispers from a group of students sitting 2 rows ahead of him. He kept his gaze fixed on the front, where the teacher droned on about the Civil War, but his mind was elsewhere, on memories of a different time, a different place. The classroom felt so far removed from his real life, the life he had before he moved here. Before the constant shifting of homes and schools, before the feeling of always being an outsider. It was hard to shake off the memories of his previous life, but Jamal had learned to cope, to adjust. His family, while unconventional, had given him the stability he so desperately needed. Growing up in a small, cramped apartment in a city that didn't always show him kindness, Jamal's life had never been easy. From a young age, he learned what it was like to be treated differently because of his skin color. At first, it was subtle, people staring at him on the bus, classmates avoiding him in the hallways, teachers overlooking him in favor of his lighter-skinned peers. He didn't understand it at first. He thought maybe he was just different. But as time went on, Jamal realized that the difference people saw wasn't just the color of his skin, it was something deeper, something more insidious. The bullying started when Jamal was in middle school. It wasn't just name-calling or shoving him in the hallways. It was the way people ignored him, made him feel invisible, and made sure he knew that he didn't belong. It was the looks his teachers gave him when he answered a question wrong, and the way his classmates laughed when he was the last to be chosen for a team in gym class. The rejection felt like a weight on his chest, something that made it hard to breathe some days. But through it all, Jamal had his father, Vin Diesel. Jamal's life wasn't like the lives of most other kids at his school. His family wasn't your typical family. Vin Diesel wasn't just a father to Jamal, he was his anchor, his rock in a world that often felt like it was spinning out of control. Vin Diesel had come into Jamal's life when he was just a toddler, adopting him when he was 4 years old. Jamal barely remembered his biological parents, all he had were vague images of a woman with kind eyes and a man whose face he could never quite place. The details of their disappearance remained a mystery to him, but what mattered more was the father who had taken him in and given him a second chance at life. A better life. Vin wasn't like other parents. He didn't sugarcoat things for Jamal or try to protect him from the harsh realities of the world. Instead, Vin taught Jamal how to face them head-on, how to stand tall in the face of adversity. He was tough, but he was also kind. He pushed Jamal to be his best, even when the world around him was telling him he didn't deserve it. "I know it's hard, son," Vin had said to Jamal one night, his deep voice a comfort after a particularly tough day at school. "But you have something that they don't. You've got heart. You've got the strength to rise above it all. And no matter what happens, you'll always be better than the people who try to bring you down." Jamal had taken those words to heart. He often found himself repeating them in his mind when the bullying became too much to bear. When kids at school would call him names or make fun of him for the way he looked, he would close his eyes and imagine his dad's strong arms around him, telling him everything would be okay. As Jamal grew older, he came to understand that his father wasn't just tough because of his physical strength. Vin Diesel was a man who had lived through hardship, through loss, and through rejection. He knew what it felt like to fight for a place in a world that didn't always accept you. Jamal respected his father more than anyone else, but at the same time, he couldn't help but feel like a burden. Vin Diesel had everything anyone could want, a successful career, fame, money, and Jamal sometimes wondered if he was just a reminder of the things his father had given up to raise him. Still, his father never made him feel like a burden. Every moment spent together, whether they were working on a car in the garage or watching movies on the couch, was a reminder of the love they shared. It was because of his father's example that Jamal refused to let the cruelty of others define him. Even when the world tried to break him, he would rise. Even when Tyler and his friends made him the target of their taunts and jokes, Jamal wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing him crumble. But that didn't mean it was easy. Jamal still felt the weight of being different. He still felt the sting of rejection. There were days when he would come home from school, exhausted and emotionally drained, and his father would look at him with those knowing eyes and ask, "How was your day?" Jamal never wanted to admit that he felt defeated, that he felt like the world was against him. But he knew his father could see through the walls he built. He knew his father understood what it felt like to be on the outside, to feel like you didn't belong. "I'm fine, Dad," Jamal would say, forcing a smile, but Vin could always tell when something wasn't right. His dad would never push him to talk, but he would always be there, ready to listen when Jamal was ready to open up. "You don't have to be fine all the time, Jamal," Vin would say. "It's okay to feel like the world's on your shoulders. But just remember, you don't have to carry it alone." Those words had been Jamal's guiding light. They were his strength when everything around him seemed to fall apart. Now, sitting in this new classroom in a school that felt just as cold and unfamiliar as the ones before it, Jamal couldn't help but think of his father. The world might feel overwhelming at times, but he knew he wasn't alone. He had someone who understood, someone who loved him no matter what. As the bell rang to end the class, Jamal packed up his things, trying to ignore the whispers and stares of the other students. He felt that familiar knot in his stomach, the one that always seemed to tighten whenever he was in a room full of people who didn't understand him. But he kept his head up and walked out of the classroom, reminding himself of what his father had taught him. No matter what happened, he wasn't going to let anyone push him down. Not Tyler, not anyone. Because Jamal knew one thing for sure, he wasn't just any regular kid. He was stronger than they could ever understand. And one day, they'd see that for themselves. The sun had barely risen, casting long shadows over the city as Jamal walked home from school. The early morning air felt crisp against his face, a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling inside him. His mind was a whirlwind, filled with thoughts of the incident at school, of Alex, the bullies, and how everything had spiraled out of control so quickly. It had started with Madison, her voice cutting through the silence of the school hallways like a knife. He had known she was trouble. The way she carried herself, that look of arrogance, she always had to be in control, always had to make others feel small to feel powerful. Jamal had managed to avoid her, keep his head down, but today, things had been different. When Madison's laughter echoed down the hall after she pushed him into the lockers, it was like everything in the world stopped for a moment. He had felt the weight of all the past years, the torment, the insults, the whispers. Every second spent in fear of her had built up to this moment. But something inside him snapped. He wasn't going to let her humiliate him again. But as the confrontation unfolded, something even darker had started to emerge from the shadows. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he pulled it out to check the message. It was from Marcus. "Meet me at the park. Need to talk. Things are getting heavy." The tension in Jamal's chest deepened. Things had been escalating for a while now, but he had no idea just how deep the rabbit hole went. The park was only a few blocks away, but every step felt like it took him further away from the life he thought he knew. When he reached the entrance, he spotted Marcus right away, leaning against the old metal swing set. His expression was serious, something Jamal wasn't used to seeing from his friend. "What's going on?" Jamal asked, walking up to him, trying to keep his voice steady despite the gnawing feeling in his stomach. Marcus didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced around, making sure no one was listening. The wind rustled the leaves above them, the only sound breaking the tense silence between them. "We need to talk." "You're in danger," Marcus said, finally meeting Jamal's eyes. Jamal froze. "What are you talking about?" "Madison isn't just some high school bully, Jamal. She's more than that. She's tied up with the syndicate." The words hit Jamal like a punch to the gut. He blinked, trying to process what Marcus was saying. The syndicate? He had heard rumors about the underground network, a web of criminals operating in the shadows of the city. But Madison? No way. It couldn't be true. She was just a spoiled rich girl, right? I don't understand. Madison? She's just a girl from school, what does she have to do with the syndicate? Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. Her family's involved, Jamal. Her father, her uncle, they run one of the biggest underground operations in this city. I've been hearing whispers about them for months. But it's not just them, she's a part of it. A big part. Jamal took a step back, his mind spinning. Madison, the girl he had been avoiding for years, was involved with the most dangerous group in the city? It didn't make sense. So, what? She's been bullying me because she's part of some gang? Marcus shook his head. It's more than that. The syndicate's been using their influence to control people, manipulate them. The bullies at school. They're not just kids with issues, they're on the payroll. And you're a target, Jamal. They don't like the idea of you standing up to them. Jamal felt his heart sink. It wasn't just high school drama. It was real, dangerous, life-threatening stuff. And he had no idea how deep the waters went. Why are you telling me this now? Jamal asked, his voice shaking. Marcus's eyes darkened. Because it's already started. You were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Madison wants something from you, Jamal. And if she doesn't get it, people will get hurt. You have to get out of here, get away from her, from all of this. The longer you stay close, the more danger you're in. Jamal's mind raced. He wasn't a kid anymore. He knew how to take care of himself, how to handle street fights, how to survive. But this? This was something different. Something far beyond his control. Get away. How? Jamal asked, trying to make sense of the situation. Where do I go? Who do I trust? Marcus stepped back, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I don't have all the answers, man. But you can't stay here. You can't keep running into her. The syndicate will come after you if they think you're standing in their way. Jamal felt a sick knot twist in his stomach. He looked around the park, at the families walking by, at the old swings creaking in the wind. It felt so normal. And yet, his life was anything but. What's the play then? Jamal asked, steeling himself for whatever was coming next. Marcus took a deep breath and looked him dead in the eyes. We get out. We find a way to expose the syndicate, take them down from the inside. That's the only way this ends. But it's not going to be easy. It's going to get dangerous. And it's going to test us both. Jamal thought about the weight of Marcus's words. He knew this was bigger than just him, bigger than high school drama or some fight for popularity. This was a battle that would determine his future, and maybe even his survival. All right, Jamal said, his voice low but resolute. What do we do first? Marcus pulled out his phone, showing Jamal a map of the city, with red dots marking various locations. I've been tracking the syndicate's movements. This is the map of their operations. I'm in contact with some people on the inside. We need to get to these spots and gather intel. But we need to be careful. One wrong move, and everything goes sideways. Jamal nodded, feeling the weight of the decision. It was no longer a matter of dodging a bully or trying to get through the school year. This was war. And he had just signed up for it. As Marcus handed him a phone number and a set of instructions, Jamal couldn't help but think about what he was getting himself into. But it was too late to back out now. Madison had already pulled him into this, and he had no choice but to fight back. All right, Jamal said, his voice steady but filled with determination. Let's take them down. The days that followed felt like a blur, each one blending into the next. The whispers in the hallways grew louder, the stares more intense. Jamal had always felt different, but now it felt as if he was living in a world that had singled him out for something beyond his control. The jokes, the stares, the constant jabs from Tyler, they had become relentless. The walls felt as though they were closing in on him, and the weight of it all threatened to crush him. But in the midst of all this, Jamal found himself standing at a crossroads. He could continue to shrink back, to keep his head down and let Tyler and his friends bully him into submission. Or, he could fight back. Not just physically, he wasn't sure he was ready for that yet, but mentally, emotionally. He could stop letting them define him. He could show them that he wasn't going to be their punching bag. It wasn't until Friday afternoon, after another embarrassing encounter in gym class, that Jamal realized something. Something deep within him shifted. He had had enough. Tyler's smirk as he walked away from the gym had been the last straw. He had seen that same look of superiority 100 times before, but now it felt different. It wasn't just a look of someone trying to assert dominance, it was a reminder of how little he had been fighting back. As Jamal walked home that day, his mind raced. The familiar route home felt like a pilgrimage of sorts, a path that had been tread too many times before, but this time, something was different. It wasn't just the usual thoughts of retreating into the comfort of his home, of pretending everything was okay. No. This time, Jamal was thinking about his future, about his father, about the strength he had buried deep inside him. He arrived at home and immediately headed to the garage. It was his sanctuary, a place where the world didn't intrude. The familiar hum of the engine in one of the cars Vin had been working on for weeks was comforting. The smell of oil, rubber, and metal filled the air, a scent Jamal had grown up with. His father was there, as always, busy working on a car that looked like it had seen better days. Vin Diesel looked up as Jamal stepped into the garage. For a moment, their eyes met, and Jamal saw the concern in his father's gaze. He knew Jamal had been struggling at school. It had been hard for Jamal to hide the tension, especially with his dad being the kind of man who could read him like an open book. But Jamal hadn't spoken about it, he didn't want to burden his father with it. "Everything okay, son?" Vin asked, setting down his tools and wiping his hands on a rag. Jamal hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. "No, Dad. It's not okay. Vin raised an eyebrow. Talk to me. Jamal paced for a moment, gathering his thoughts. There's this guy at school, Tyler. He's been messing with me. And his friends. Every day, they make my life miserable. I try to ignore it, but it's getting worse. I feel like I'm drowning, and there's nothing I can do about it. Vin watched him for a moment, his expression unreadable. Jamal felt a wave of frustration wash over him. I know you think I can handle this, Dad. But it's harder than you think. I can't just keep taking it. I feel like I'm being broken down piece by piece. Vin didn't answer immediately. He walked over to the car he had been working on, his hand brushing over the hood, as if considering something. Finally, he turned to Jamal and said, You know, Jamal, life's gonna throw things at you. People are gonna try and tear you down. But here's the thing, the world doesn't define you. You define you. Jamal frowned, not quite understanding. What do you mean? Vin stepped closer, his voice soft but firm. When I was younger, I had people tell me I'd never make it. That I was just another guy with dreams too big for the world. But you know what? I didn't listen to them. I worked hard. I proved them wrong. It wasn't easy, but I did it because I refused to let anyone tell me who I was or what I could become. Jamal's frustration flared again. But, Dad, it's different for me. It's not just about being tough. It's like they have this power over me. Every time I stand up, they knock me back down. Vin's expression softened. It's not about standing up just once. It's about standing up every single time. You don't have to win the battle in one day, but you keep fighting. You keep showing them who you are, no matter what they throw at you. Jamal took in his father's words, the weight of them sinking in. It wasn't just about surviving this battle, it was about reclaiming control over his own life. He didn't have to be Tyler's target forever. He didn't have to let anyone define him. Not even Tyler. I can't fight them all at once, Jamal said, his voice quiet but determined. But I can make sure they know I'm not backing down. I won't give them the satisfaction. Vin smiled, clapping Jamal on the back. That's my boy. You don't need to fight with your fists to win. Sometimes, just showing up and refusing to back down is the hardest fight of all. The next Monday at school, Jamal felt different. The nervousness that had always plagued him before class was still there, but this time, it was accompanied by something else, something stronger. It was determination. The first step of his journey had begun. He had decided he wasn't going to take it anymore. When Tyler approached him during lunch, Jamal didn't flinch. He didn't look down or shrink back. Tyler made a sneering comment about Jamal's clothes, a joke about how he must have stolen them from a thrift store, but Jamal didn't let it get to him. He stood tall and met Tyler's gaze. Is that the best you've got, Tyler? Jamal said, his voice steady. Because I've heard worse from people who actually matter. Tyler's eyes widened for a second, surprised by Jamal's defiance. He opened his mouth to say something, but Jamal cut him off. You know what? I'm done with this. You want to pick on me, fine. But don't expect me to just stand here and take it anymore. You've had your fun, but I'm not your target anymore. The cafeteria went silent. Jamal could feel all eyes on him, but he didn't care. The power was shifting, and for the first time, he could feel it. He wasn't going to let Tyler control him. He wasn't going to let anyone control him. Tyler, taken aback by Jamal's words, didn't know how to respond. For a moment, he just stared, as if trying to process what had just happened. Then, with a scoff, he turned away and walked off, his friends following him, clearly confused by the unexpected turn of events. Jamal exhaled a deep breath, his heart still pounding, but this time, with a sense of accomplishment. He had taken control of the situation. He had made his stand. This was just the beginning. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but he knew one thing for sure, he was done being a victim. He was going to fight for his place, for his dignity, and for the respect he deserved. The following days felt like a whirlwind. Jamal had made a decision, and he was sticking to it. He wasn't going to let Tyler and his friends get to him. He was going to fight back with everything he had. But what Jamal hadn't realized was that the battle was far from over. And as much as he thought he could handle it, life had a way of throwing unexpected challenges his way. It was a Friday afternoon when the real turning point came. Jamal was walking through the crowded halls of the school, his mind focused on the day ahead. He was still riding the high from his stand against Tyler earlier in the week. He had felt strong, empowered even. It was the first time in weeks that he didn't feel like a victim. He was in control now. But as he rounded the corner near the locker rooms, he suddenly felt something in the pit of his stomach. A wave of unease washed over him, and it wasn't just the usual anxiety. It was something else. His instinct told him something wasn't right. He tried to shake it off, but his feet seemed to slow down of their own accord. Just as he was about to reach his locker, he heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind him. And then the voice. "Hey, Jamal." Jamal froze. He recognized that voice. It was Tyler, but it wasn't the usual mocking tone that he had come to expect. There was something different about it now. The tone was lower, more serious. Jamal's heart rate quickened. He turned around slowly, bracing himself for whatever Tyler had planned this time. To his surprise, Tyler wasn't alone. Standing beside him was a tall, muscular figure Jamal didn't immediately recognize. But what struck him was the man's presence. He carried himself with an undeniable authority. It was as if the air itself seemed to shift when he entered the room. "Jamal," Tyler said again, his voice softer now, almost as if he was trying to sound sincere. "Can we talk for a second?" Jamal hesitated, his pulse racing. He didn't trust this moment. Not for a second. The situation felt wrong, like a trap. But something in Tyler's demeanor made Jamal pause. The usual arrogance and cocky attitude weren't there. Instead, there was a nervousness, a hesitation that caught Jamal off guard. "Yeah. What do you want, Tyler?" Jamal asked, his voice cautious but calm. Tyler glanced at the tall figure beside him and nodded slightly, as if receiving some kind of silent cue. The man stepped forward and introduced himself. "I'm Ray," the man said, his voice deep and gravelly. "Tyler's uncle. I've been hearing about you, Jamal." Jamal furrowed his brow. "What's this all about? I didn't know Tyler had an uncle here. What do you want with me?" Ray's expression softened slightly. "It's not about what I want, son. It's about what you need to understand." Jamal was confused, but there was something about Ray's tone that made him uneasy. The man wasn't threatening, but there was a weight to his words that made Jamal feel like something much bigger was at play than he had anticipated. Tyler, who had been mostly silent up until now, shifted uncomfortably on his feet. "Look, man. I know I've been a total jerk to you," Tyler started, his voice almost apologetic. "I've been giving you a hard time, and I need to come clean." Jamal raised an eyebrow, skeptical. This wasn't like Tyler at all. "Come clean about what?" he asked. Tyler took a deep breath. "It's about your dad. Vin Diesel. He's not just a car mechanic, Jamal. You probably don't know this, but I do." Jamal's chest tightened at the mention of his father's name. Vin had always kept things low-key, never talked much about his past or who he knew. Jamal had grown up with stories about his father's success, but none of it was ever discussed in detail. It had always been this quiet, almost mysterious thing. "What about my dad?" Jamal asked, his voice cold, not sure if he wanted to hear the answer. Ray stepped in, his deep voice drawing Jamal's attention. "Your father, he's been more than just a mechanic. He has connections. Big connections. And I'm not talking about the kind you see in magazines or online. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. You see, Vin Diesel is more than just a celebrity. He's also a very well-known figure in certain circles. In fact, he's part of something bigger, a family, in a way. Jamal's mind raced. He had always known that his father was special, but this was something else entirely. It felt as though the world was shifting beneath his feet. What are you talking about? Jamal asked, his voice shaking with disbelief. My dad's just a regular guy who fixes cars. He's not part of any family. What is this? Tyler gave a nervous glance at Ray, who nodded encouragingly. Your father's adopted me, Tyler continued, almost reluctantly. Vin took me in when I was a kid, after everything went south with my real parents. He's been like a father to me ever since. And I never told you this, but I've been keeping tabs on you, watching out for you. In my own way. Jamal stood frozen, his mind struggling to process everything that was unfolding. He had always admired his father, but he never imagined that there was so much more to him. That Vin Diesel wasn't just the strong, silent figure Jamal knew, he was a part of something bigger. Something Jamal hadn't even realized. Tyler's eyes softened as he continued. I know I've been hard on you. I know it was wrong to treat you like that, but I didn't want you to think you were some special kid because of who your dad is. I wanted to see if you could stand on your own. I thought you needed to find your own path. Jamal's chest tightened as he processed Tyler's words. The confusion, the anger, the feeling of betrayal, it all crashed into him like a tidal wave. You knew. All this time, you knew who I was. Jamal's voice was a mixture of disbelief and frustration. Tyler nodded sheepishly. I did. And I didn't handle it right. But I wasn't sure if you were ready to know, if it would change things for you. Ray stepped forward, his voice grave but understanding. Jamal, the world you think you know is just the surface. Your dad isn't just a mechanic or a celebrity. He's a man who's been through a lot. And his past, well, it's complicated. But one thing's for sure, he has always wanted you to make your own choices. To choose your own path, without anyone forcing you to be part of his world. Jamal felt his knees weaken as the weight of the revelation hit him. He had no idea where to go from here. He didn't know if he could ever look at Tyler the same way again, or if he could understand what this meant for his relationship with his dad. Jamal's head was spinning. The hallway around him felt like it was closing in as the words, "Your dad's not just a mechanic," echoed in his mind. Tyler's apology and Ray's explanation had created a storm inside him, emotions, doubts, and questions flooding his thoughts. For a moment, he could barely breathe. I need to go, Jamal muttered, barely registering his own voice. Without waiting for a response, he turned on his heel and walked away, the sounds of his footsteps drowned by the pounding of his heart. He didn't know where he was going, but he couldn't stay there. Not with Tyler's words hanging in the air, not with the weight of everything he had just learned. He needed space. Time to think. His legs carried him automatically toward the one place he always went when he needed to think, his dad's garage. It had always been his sanctuary, a place where the world seemed to pause for a moment, and he could lose himself in the rhythm of the work. It wasn't just about the cars, it was about the peace it brought him. The steady hum of the tools, the scent of gasoline, and the metallic tang of engines, it was all a comforting reminder of the only constant in his life. When Jamal arrived at the garage, the door was open, and the soft glow of the overhead lights illuminated the workspace. Vin was there, as always, elbow deep in a car engine, his sleeves rolled up and his face focused. For a moment, Jamal just stood there, watching his dad work. He could feel the overwhelming swirl of emotions, confusion, anger, betrayal, all of it. But more than anything, he could feel the tug of something deeper, a sense of wanting to understand, to make sense of the life he had always known. Vin looked up and saw Jamal standing in the doorway, his face unreadable. There was a moment of silence before Vin spoke, his voice soft but steady. "You okay, son?" he asked, his gaze full of concern. Jamal nodded, but the truth was, he didn't feel okay. He felt like a stranger in his own life, standing on the edge of something he hadn't been prepared for. I don't know," Jamal admitted, his voice quiet. "I don't know what to think right now." Vin wiped his hands on a rag and stood up, walking toward Jamal. He didn't rush, didn't push. He just waited, giving Jamal the time he needed. Finally, Jamal spoke again, his words coming out in a rush. "Tyler. He told me everything. About you. About how you're not just a mechanic, how you've adopted him, how there's this whole thing I didn't know about. I don't understand, Dad. I thought you were just some quiet guy who liked working on cars. I didn't know there was this whole other side to you." Vin's expression softened. He could see the confusion in Jamal's eyes, the hurt. He had been waiting for this moment, knew it would come eventually. But he also knew that there was more to the story, much more, and Jamal needed to hear it from him, not anyone else. Taking a deep breath, Vin sat down on the workbench, gesturing for Jamal to do the same. Jamal hesitated for a moment before joining him, sitting on the bench with his hands folded tightly in his lap. "I never wanted you to feel like you had to live up to some image, Jamal," Vin began, his voice low but full of sincerity. "When I took you in, I wanted you to know one thing: your worth is not tied to anything other than who you are. I didn't want you to think you were part of some world you weren't ready for. I wanted you to grow up just like any other kid, to know that you can choose your own path without worrying about the weight of my past." Jamal swallowed hard. "But why didn't you tell me? Why keep it a secret?" Vin's eyes softened. "Because I didn't want you to feel like your identity had to be shaped by me. By the people I know, the things I've done. It wasn't about protecting you from the truth, Jamal. It was about giving you the space to become your own person. I didn't want you to feel like you were in my shadow, like you had to carry the burden of my past." Jamal sat in silence, letting the weight of his father's words sink in. It was a lot to process. His mind swirled with new understanding, but also confusion. There was so much he hadn't known, so much his father had kept from him. He wasn't sure if he could fully grasp all of it just yet. "I'm not sure I get it all, Dad," Jamal said quietly. "I mean, I've always looked up to you, you know. But now I feel like I don't even know who you really are. And Tyler, why didn't you tell me about him? Why didn't you tell me that he's your adopted son?" Vin sighed deeply. "It's not an easy thing to explain, son. But here's the truth, Tyler's been through a lot. More than you could imagine. I adopted him when he was just a kid, and I've been trying to give him the same things I've always wanted for you, a chance to be better than the cards he was dealt. I didn't want to burden you with that. You had enough on your plate already. But now, things have changed, and you're part of this, whether you like it or not." Jamal felt a wave of frustration rise in his chest. "But why keep it from me? You told me everything about the cars, about your job. You taught me how to work hard, how to stay true to myself. Why leave out this huge part of who you are?" Vin looked at his son, his face softening as he tried to explain the pain he had kept hidden. "Because I didn't want to risk you thinking that your life had to be something that wasn't yours to choose. I wanted you to see the world for what it is, not what it could be because of who I am. The truth is, you've always been in control of your own destiny. I didn't want you to think that just because of who I am, you had to follow some path you didn't want." Jamal looked at his father, his heart heavy with the weight of everything he had just learned. He had always thought he understood his dad, that he had this clear picture of who he was. But now, that picture was shattered, replaced by something more complex, something that wasn't so easily defined. For a moment, there was silence between them. Jamal felt his emotions swirling, anger, confusion, even a hint of betrayal, but deep down, he knew his father had done what he thought was best for him. Maybe it wasn't perfect, but it was a choice that had been made out of love, not out of malice. Finally, Jamal spoke, his voice quieter but more certain. "I'm still not sure I understand all of it, Dad. But I get it. I get why you did what you did." Vin smiled gently, his hand resting on Jamal's shoulder. "I don't expect you to understand it all right away. But one thing I want you to remember, your journey is your own. It always has been. And I'll be here to support you, no matter what you decide." Jamal nodded slowly, feeling a sense of peace begin to settle in his chest. It wasn't all resolved, not yet. But he knew one thing for sure, he wasn't alone in this. And the road ahead, no matter how difficult, was his to walk. The weekend passed in a blur, and Jamal found himself caught in the quiet aftermath of his conversation with his dad. Everything had shifted, but nothing had fully settled. There was still a weight on his chest, a knot that wouldn't loosen. The world felt both bigger and smaller at the same time. Jamal was left with more questions than answers, and despite his dad's reassurance, he couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty. On Monday morning, Jamal stood in front of his mirror, his mind spinning. He was used to the routine of school, the same old faces, the same old jokes, and the usual drama. But today felt different. Today, he wasn't just Jamal the quiet kid who kept to himself. Today, he was someone who had just discovered that everything he thought he knew about his life was a lie, or at least, an incomplete version of the truth. His father wasn't just a mechanic. His father wasn't just a man who loved cars. And that meant Jamal wasn't just some kid who liked to tinker with engines. He was someone with a legacy, a history tied to something bigger, something he wasn't sure he was ready for. And then there was Tyler. Tyler, who had kept so many secrets from him. Tyler, who was now part of the equation, for better or worse. Jamal didn't know what to expect today. He didn't know how to face anyone, especially Tyler. He had never felt more disconnected from everything and everyone. The world had shifted beneath his feet, and Jamal wasn't sure if he was ready to stand on it. His phone buzzed on his dresser, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was a message from Tyler. "Tyler, hey, you okay? Can we talk today? I know it's a lot, but we need to sort this out." Jamal stared at the message for a moment, his fingers hovering over the screen. He wasn't sure he was ready for this conversation. After everything that had happened, after the truth came crashing down, he didn't know what he could say to Tyler. How could he trust him now? But part of him knew that they needed to talk, that there was no running away from this. With a sigh, he typed out a quick response. "Jamal, yeah, I guess. Meet me after school." Tyler's reply came almost instantly. "Tyler, sounds good. I'll be there." Jamal put his phone down and grabbed his bag, heading out the door. The day at school was a blur of classes and half-hearted interactions. He couldn't focus. His mind was on the conversation with Tyler, and his heart was still tangled up in the mess of everything he'd learned. But as the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, Jamal knew it was time. It was time to face whatever came next. He walked out of the building and saw Tyler standing near the front steps, looking almost as lost as Jamal felt. Tyler's usual confidence seemed to be replaced with an uneasy energy. He was pacing back and forth, his hands shoved in his pockets, his head down. As soon as he saw Jamal approaching, he stopped. "Hey," Tyler said quietly, his voice uncertain. "I wasn't sure if you'd actually show up." Jamal shrugged, trying to mask the nerves that were creeping up on him. "I said I would." There was a long pause, both of them standing there, not quite sure where to go next. Finally, Tyler broke the silence. "Look, Jamal. I know I screwed up. I know I've messed with your head, and I can't undo that. But I need you to understand something." Tyler took a deep breath, his eyes meeting Jamal's. "I never meant to hurt you. I just didn't know how to handle everything. I didn't want you to think I was trying to use you because of who your dad is. I thought if I kept my distance, kept things normal between us, it would make things easier. Jamal clenched his fists, his mind still processing everything. Normal? Tyler, you've been treating me like crap for months. You didn't care about being normal, you just wanted to make me feel small. You thought that by keeping this secret from me, it would be easier. For who? You or me? Tyler winced, his expression hardening slightly before it softened again. I know, okay. I know I made the wrong choices. But you have to understand something. My whole life, it's been a mess. And I didn't want to drag you into that. I thought if I just kept my distance, maybe you could have a shot at normal, you know. I didn't want you to feel like you had to be part of this crazy world. Jamal stood there, trying to make sense of it all. His emotions were still raw, and the truth stung. He had been so blind to everything. He had trusted Tyler, had looked up to him, and yet Tyler had been hiding everything from him. Jamal felt betrayed, but at the same time, there was a part of him that understood. He knew what it felt like to try to protect someone, to keep them from the chaos in your life. But it didn't excuse what Tyler had done. You can't just hide things from me, Tyler. I deserve the truth. I deserve to know what's going on in my own life. You're not the only one who's been keeping secrets. Tyler nodded, looking down. I know. I didn't want to complicate things. I didn't want to drag you into the mess I've made of my life. Jamal took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside him. Tyler, I don't know what this is between us anymore. I don't know if we can go back to the way things were. But I think, for the first time, I'm starting to get it. You've got your own issues, and I've got mine. Maybe we're both just trying to figure things out. There was another pause, but this time, it felt less uncomfortable. Tyler gave Jamal a small, hesitant smile. I know I messed up. And I can't fix that. But I'm sorry. I really am. Jamal nodded, his anger and frustration simmering down, replaced by something else, a cautious sense of understanding. He wasn't sure if Tyler's apology was enough, but it was a start. The truth was, Jamal didn't know where their friendship would go from here. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't all lost. Maybe we can work through this, Jamal said slowly. But it's going to take time. And I'm not going to forget what you did. I wouldn't expect you to, Tyler said quietly. The two of them stood there for a moment, neither of them knowing what to say next. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in days, Jamal felt like he was at least heading in the right direction. He wasn't sure if things would ever be the same. But at least he wasn't alone in it anymore. The days that followed were filled with a new tension. Jamal had expected things to return to normal, or at least, to some semblance of normalcy. But every time he passed Tyler in the halls or found himself sitting beside him in class, the weight of their conversation lingered between them like an unspoken truth, both suffocating and relieving at the same time. Jamal still didn't know what to make of Tyler's apology. Part of him wanted to believe that things would go back to how they were before, the easy banter, the jokes, the camaraderie. But there was a subtle shift, something that felt irreparable, and Jamal knew he couldn't just sweep everything under the rug and pretend that it hadn't happened. Trust was a fragile thing, and once it was broken, it wasn't so easily mended. He spent more time in his father's garage, not just for the peace it brought him, but to keep his mind off everything else. The engine of an old muscle car hummed under his hands as he worked, the rhythm of the task grounding him in a way nothing else could. It was easy to lose himself in the hum of the machines, in the rhythm of tightening bolts and wiping grease from his hands. For a few hours, Jamal could forget about the mess of his life. But as the days wore on, new, looming reality began to weigh on him. School wasn't just about classes anymore. It wasn't just about grades or getting through another day of awkward cafeteria lunches. It was about the people he was now tied to, the people who had once been his friends and now felt like strangers. And it was about his father, who had always been his steady rock, but whose past seemed to be getting more complicated by the day. One particular morning, the weight of everything caught up with Jamal. He had just finished breakfast, grabbed his backpack, and was heading out the door when his dad stopped him. "Jamal," Vin said, his voice quiet but firm. "We need to talk." Jamal froze in place. The calm tone in his dad's voice immediately set off warning bells in his head. What now? Was this about Tyler? Was his dad going to say something more about his past, about the family secrets that Jamal hadn't yet fully processed? "Sure," Jamal said, keeping his voice even. "What's up?" Vin motioned for Jamal to sit at the kitchen table. With a deep sigh, he took a seat opposite his son, folding his hands in front of him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It was like they were both searching for the right words, trying to figure out how to bridge the gap that had suddenly formed between them. "I know things have been complicated lately," Vin began, his eyes looking directly into Jamal's. "And I don't want to make things harder for you. But there's something coming up that I need to tell you." Jamal raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. "What's going on?" Vin hesitated for a moment, clearly choosing his words carefully. "I've been offered a job opportunity. A big one. It's a chance for me to work with some people I've known for a long time. People who could change everything for us. For you." Jamal blinked in surprise. "What kind of job? What do you mean, change everything?" Vin leaned forward, his expression serious. "It's a business venture. Something that could secure our future in ways you wouldn't believe. But here's the thing, I'll be traveling a lot, working with high-profile clients. It's going to take a lot of my time, Jamal. I'm not going to be around as much." Jamal's mind raced. The idea of his dad being gone more, of having to face this new reality on his own, felt overwhelming. He wasn't sure he could handle that, not after everything that had happened, not when everything in his life seemed to be shifting beneath his feet. "I don't understand," Jamal said quietly. "Isn't what you've been doing enough? Why do you need this new job? What about me?" Vin's face softened. "Jamal, this isn't about what I want. It's about securing a future for you. This isn't going to be easy, and it's not going to be immediate. But in the long run, it could set us up in ways you can't imagine. And I need you to understand something." Jamal waited, his heart racing. He wasn't sure what his dad was trying to say, but he could sense that there was more to this conversation than he was letting on. "I need you to be ready for the changes that are coming," Vin continued. "And I need you to take care of things here when I'm gone. I can't do this without you. I know it's a lot to ask, but I believe in you." Jamal sat back in his chair, absorbing his father's words. The weight of the expectation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Jamal had always admired his dad, had always looked up to him as the person who could handle anything, the person who always knew what to do. But now, Jamal was being asked to step up in a way he wasn't sure he was ready for. "I don't know if I'm ready for that," Jamal muttered. "I mean, what if I screw it up? What if I can't handle everything? What if things get worse?" Vin's expression softened, and he placed a reassuring hand on Jamal's shoulder. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. But I'm telling you this because I trust you. You've been growing up, and you're starting to understand the weight of responsibility. I need you to keep pushing forward. And I'll be here, even if I'm not physically around. You're never alone in this, Jamal." Jamal's chest tightened as he looked at his father. There was a mixture of pride and fear in his heart. His dad was asking him to step into a role he wasn't sure he was ready for, a role that felt too big for him. But the truth was, he knew his dad needed him. The responsibility wasn't just about the job or the money, it was about family, about carrying the legacy of everything his father had built. "I'll try," Jamal said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "But I can't promise it will be easy." "I don't expect it to be easy," Vin replied with a small smile. "But I do expect you to try. That's all any of us can do. As Jamal left the house that morning, heading for school, he couldn't shake the weight of his dad's words. The future was suddenly much bigger than he had ever imagined, and the pressure was mounting. Tyler's apology was one thing, but now he had to step up for his family, for his future, and he wasn't sure if he was ready. But with every step, Jamal knew one thing: he was no longer just a kid who tinkered with engines in his dad's garage. He was part of something bigger, and whether he liked it or not, he had to face it head-on. The following weeks felt like a blur to Jamal. He spent more time than ever in the garage, trying to focus on fixing cars, but every time he picked up a wrench, his mind would drift back to the conversation he had with his father. It wasn't just the weight of the expectations that pressed on him, it was the question of whether he was capable of stepping into a world he hadn't even known existed until recently. There was a side to his father, to their life, that Jamal was only beginning to understand. A side that was both intimidating and intriguing. Every time Jamal thought about his father's new job offer, the more conflicted he felt. The idea of his dad being gone more was hard enough to process, but now, there was this undercurrent of tension in the air, like something bigger was at play, something Jamal couldn't yet fully grasp. He knew his dad was hiding something, or at least not telling him the whole truth. And every time Jamal tried to ask more about the business venture, Vin would deflect or change the subject. It was frustrating, not knowing what was coming. Jamal hated not having all the answers, but more than that, he hated feeling like his dad was keeping him in the dark. It felt like the distance between them was growing, despite how hard they were both trying to keep it together. Jamal couldn't help but wonder if the distance was more than just physical. Was it emotional, too? Was it something he had done, or something he hadn't done? School had become a strange place, too. Tyler seemed to be keeping his distance, and Jamal wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing. He hadn't heard much from him since their conversation after school, and though Jamal had expected things to be awkward, they were more strained than anything. Tyler would nod at him in the halls, sometimes giving him a half-hearted smile, but there was always that invisible wall between them. Jamal wasn't sure how to break it down, or even if he wanted to. After all, Tyler had his own baggage to sort through, just like Jamal did. One day, as Jamal walked into the school parking lot, he saw a familiar face leaning against a shiny black car. It was a car that Jamal recognized, his father's car. The model wasn't common, and seeing it here, in front of his school, gave him a jolt of confusion. Who was here with his dad's car? Jamal's heart skipped a beat when he saw who was standing beside it. It was one of his father's old friends, a man Jamal had only seen a few times. His name was Marcus, and Jamal remembered him from when he was younger, always laughing, always talking business. But there was something unsettling about the way Marcus stood there now, his eyes scanning the parking lot like he was waiting for someone. "Jamal," Marcus called out as he noticed him walking toward the entrance. "How's it going, man?" Jamal didn't trust his smile. There was something off about it, something too rehearsed. Hey, Marcus. What are you doing here?" Marcus chuckled, pushing himself off the car and straightening up. "Just doing a little checkup. Your dad and I are working on a few things, and I wanted to swing by, see how things were going for you." Jamal narrowed his eyes. "Why are you here? This isn't exactly the best place for checkups." Marcus's smile faded slightly. "You know how it is, Jamal. Business. People don't always do things in the most obvious places. But hey, your dad's doing great, you know. Always knew you'd be a good kid. I like the way you've been handling things lately." Jamal shifted uncomfortably. The praise felt strange coming from Marcus, a man who Jamal had always found to be a little too slick, a little too smooth in his words. "I'm just trying to get through school like everyone else." Of course, Marcus said, his tone light, but there was something unsettling about the way he was eyeing Jamal. "Just don't forget what your dad's been trying to do for you. You've got a good opportunity ahead of you, Jamal. Don't let it slip away." The words hung in the air, and Jamal couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus was trying to tell him something hidden between the lines. The mention of his father's plans felt like a veiled threat, an unspoken warning. Before Jamal could respond, Marcus gave him a sharp nod and pushed himself off the car. "Anyway, I've got to head out. You'll see me around. Take care, kid." Jamal watched him walk away, his stomach in knots. There was no reason for Marcus to be at school, especially with his dad's car. It wasn't a coincidence. And the way Marcus spoke to him, like he was trying to plant something in his head, made Jamal feel even more uneasy. As he walked into the school, Jamal's mind was racing. What was his father involved in? What was going on behind the scenes? Marcus's words felt like they had deeper meaning, but Jamal couldn't quite decipher them. It was clear that his father was involved in something far more complex than he had let on, and whatever that was, it was pulling Jamal into a world he didn't understand. He tried to shake it off as he sat down in class, but it lingered throughout the day. Jamal found himself constantly looking over his shoulder, wondering if someone was watching him, wondering if Marcus was really just a businessman or if there was more to him than that. After school, Jamal didn't head straight to the garage like he usually did. Instead, he drove around for a while, letting his thoughts settle. He needed answers. His dad wasn't telling him everything, and now Marcus's cryptic words were eating away at him. Jamal had always prided himself on not being naive, on being able to read people, but he couldn't read this situation. He couldn't figure out who was trustworthy, and who was playing him for a fool. That night, after dinner, Jamal went to his dad's room. Vin was at the kitchen table, going over paperwork, the glow of his laptop casting shadows on his face. "Dad, we need to talk," Jamal said, his voice firm but tinged with uncertainty. Vin looked up, surprised by the sudden change in his son's tone. "What's going on?" Jamal took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "What's going on with you and Marcus? Why was he at my school today?" Vin froze, his expression changing for the briefest second. It was subtle, but Jamal noticed it. His dad's eyes darkened, his hand tightening around the edge of the table. "Marcus?" Vin said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "You don't need to worry about him. He's just someone I've known for a long time. We're working on a few things." Jamal's gut told him that wasn't the whole story. "What kind of things?" Vin's gaze hardened, and he set his laptop aside. "Jamal, I've told you what you need to know. You don't need to get involved in any of this. Just focus on your schoolwork, okay?" But Jamal wasn't satisfied. The answer felt like a dismissal, like his father was hiding something. "Something important. I can't just ignore it, Dad. Something's going on, and I'm not stupid. What aren't you telling me?" For a long moment, Vin didn't speak. Finally, he let out a sigh, his shoulders slumping. "I'm doing this to protect you, Jamal. Sometimes the less you know, the better. Trust me, okay? I'm doing what I think is best for our future." Jamal stood there, staring at his father, the weight of his words hanging heavily in the air. He wanted to trust his dad, he really did. But something in his gut told him that there was more to this than what his father was willing to admit. The days after that conversation with his dad felt like they were moving in slow motion. Jamal couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that something was seriously wrong. His dad's cryptic responses and the sudden appearance of Marcus at school made his suspicions grow. What was his father involved in, and why was he keeping so much from him? Jamal tried to keep his mind on his schoolwork, but it wasn't easy. Every time he picked up his notebook or sat in class, his thoughts wandered. He couldn't help but wonder what kind of business his father and Marcus were involved in. Was it dangerous? Was it illegal? The questions swirled in his mind like an unsolvable puzzle, and the more Jamal thought about it, the more frustrated he became. One afternoon, after school, Jamal found himself at the garage again. It was his sanctuary, the one place where he could tune out everything else. He grabbed a wrench and started working on an old engine, the familiar sound of the tool against metal soothing him, even if just for a moment. But his peace was interrupted by the sound of a car pulling up. Jamal glanced up to see a sleek black SUV parked outside the garage. He recognized the vehicle immediately. It was Marcus's. Jamal's heart skipped a beat. This time, he wasn't going to let it go. He wiped his hands on a rag, set the wrench down, and walked out of the garage. As he approached the car, Marcus stepped out, looking sharp in a suit that seemed too out of place in the quiet, run-down neighborhood. "Jamal," Marcus said with his usual grin. "Glad to see you here. Your dad's been keeping you busy, huh?" Jamal didn't return the smile. He wasn't in the mood for small talk. "What's going on, Marcus? Why are you here?" Marcus's grin faltered for just a second, but it quickly returned. "You know, just checking in. Your dad and we've got a few things to take care of. Business stuff, you know how it is." "Business stuff?" Jamal repeated, his voice hard. "I'm not stupid, Marcus. I've been asking my dad about you, and he keeps shutting me down. Why were you at my school the other day?" Marcus looked at him, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Listen, kid, I don't want to get into this right now. There are things that your dad is trying to protect you from. Trust me, it's better if you stay out of it." Jamal's frustration flared. "No. I'm not staying out of it anymore. You're not fooling me. What kind of business are you two really running?" For a moment, Marcus didn't respond. He just looked at Jamal, sizing him up. Then he sighed, his tone shifting slightly, as if he had decided to drop the act. "All right," he said, walking over to the garage door and leaning against it. "You want the truth? Fine. But don't say I didn't warn you." Jamal's heart was pounding in his chest as he crossed his arms and waited for Marcus to continue. "Your dad's been involved in some stuff for a while now," Marcus began, his voice quieter, more serious. "Things you wouldn't understand yet. But it's not just business deals. It's connections. People who have the power to change everything for him, things that could get him into big trouble if the wrong people find out. And he's trying to protect you from that." Jamal's head spun. He had suspected that his dad was hiding something, but hearing it out loud, hearing Marcus admit it, was different. His dad had always been his rock, the steady hand guiding him through life. Now, Jamal wasn't sure what to believe. "People like who?" Jamal asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "What kind of connections are you talking about?" Marcus hesitated, glancing around as if checking to make sure no one was listening. "Let's just say your dad's past isn't as clean as you think. He's been involved with people who have power, influence. They deal with things that normal people don't ever see, and your dad's been trying to keep you away from it. Trying to keep you safe." Jamal's mind raced. "Safe from what? What kind of things are you talking about?" Marcus looked at Jamal for a long moment, as if debating whether to tell him more. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and cautious. "Drugs. Money laundering. The kind of stuff that gets people in deep trouble. Your dad's never been the main player, but he's been close to the people who are. And now, he's got a chance to make it big. But it's not a clean opportunity. Not by a long shot." Jamal took a step back, his breath catching in his throat. He felt like the ground had been pulled out from under him. His father, the man who had always told him to work hard and stay honest, had been involved in all of this? Jamal couldn't process it. "Why didn't he tell me?" Jamal asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why keep me in the dark?" "Because he was trying to protect you," Marcus replied, his eyes softening. "He didn't want you to be a part of this world. And he still doesn't. He's trying to get out, Jamal. But it's not that easy. Once you're in, it's hard to leave." Jamal stood there, frozen. His mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Anger, betrayal, confusion, and a deep sense of loss. The man he had looked up to, the man he had trusted with everything, had been hiding a secret life, a life that was dangerous and dark. Marcus sighed, clearly sensing Jamal's inner turmoil. I know this is a lot to take in. But I'm telling you this because you need to know the truth. Your dad's not the bad guy here, Jamal. He's just caught in something he can't get out of. And now, you're caught in it too. But you have to understand, you have a choice. You don't have to follow him down this road. Jamal turned away, pacing for a moment as the weight of everything pressed down on him. His dad had always been the hero in his life, the man who worked hard to give him everything he needed. But now, Jamal wasn't sure what was real anymore. What if his dad's so-called protection had just been an illusion? What if he had been lying to Jamal for years? The silence stretched between them before Marcus spoke again, his tone more somber. Look, kid. I'm not asking you to forgive him or forget what he's done. But you need to make your own decision. You can't live in the shadow of your father's choices forever. You have to decide what kind of man you want to be. Jamal didn't respond right away. He just stood there, letting the words sink in. The world around him suddenly felt smaller, more suffocating. He didn't know what to believe. His entire life had been built on a foundation of trust in his father, and now that foundation was crumbling. Finally, Jamal turned to face Marcus, his expression hard. I need to talk to my dad. This isn't over. Marcus nodded slowly. I figured as much. Just don't do anything you'll regret, Jamal. As Marcus got back into his car and drove off, Jamal stood there for a long time, processing everything. The weight of the truth had landed on his shoulders, and he didn't know how to carry it. But one thing was clear, the life he thought he knew was gone. There was no going back now. The real question was, where would he go from here? The air in the garage felt thick, oppressive, as Jamal sat on the hood of an old car, his thoughts swirling. Marcus's words were still echoing in his head, like a ticking time bomb. His father's secrets, the dangerous people he was involved with, the lies, all of it. The truth felt like an anchor pulling him down into a sea of confusion and betrayal. He had always trusted Vin, but now, everything was in question. Was his father really trying to protect him, or had he been lying to him for years? Jamal knew he couldn't leave this unanswered. He couldn't let the uncertainty hang over him any longer. He had to confront his dad, face to face, and demand the truth. The thought made his chest tighten, but he knew it was the only way to get the answers he needed. That evening, when his father arrived home, Jamal didn't wait for him to settle in. He was already waiting in the living room, his arms crossed, his jaw clenched. Vin walked in, his tired eyes lighting up when he saw Jamal. Hey, kid, you okay? He asked, his voice laced with concern. But Jamal didn't respond with a simple, I'm fine. He wasn't fine. Not by a long shot. Why didn't you tell me about Marcus? Jamal asked, his voice steady but filled with a quiet fury. Why didn't you tell me what you've been involved in all these years? Vin froze. His face shifted from friendly to guarded, and for a split second, Jamal saw a flicker of something else in his father's eyes, something dark, something he couldn't quite place. I told you to stay away from all that, Vin said softly, his tone more defensive than Jamal had ever heard. I've been trying to protect you, Jamal. You don't need to know that part of my life. It's not for you. Not for me. Jamal repeated, his voice rising. You've been lying to me for years, Dad. All this time, I thought I knew you, that you were just trying to do the right thing, trying to make a better life for us. But now, I find out you've been involved in some shady business, dealing with dangerous people. How could you keep that from me? Vin's face hardened, and he took a deep breath. Jamal, listen to me. I never wanted you to be a part of that world. I never wanted you to know about the things I've done. I made mistakes, but I was doing it all for you. To keep you safe, to keep you out of it. Jamal shook his head, his fists tightening at his sides. And what about now? What's going on with Marcus? What's he really involved in? What are you really doing with him? Vin hesitated, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for the right words. Marcus is a part of my past, Jamal. We go way back, and yeah, we've done things that aren't exactly legal. But I've been trying to get out. I've been trying to make a clean break, for you. For us. Jamal's heart pounded. So, what, you're just gonna walk away from it all? It's not that easy, is it? You're not just getting out. You can't just walk away from people like Marcus. You can't walk away from this kind of life. Vin's expression faltered for a moment, and Jamal could see the weight of his father's struggles written all over his face. I know it's complicated, Vin said, his voice softer now. But I'm doing my best to keep you out of this. I wanted a better life for you, Jamal. I wanted you to have everything I didn't have growing up. I've tried to do right by you, even if I've made some mistakes along the way. Jamal's anger was still there, but now, there was something else, too. Pain. Betrayal. He had always looked up to his dad, always thought of him as a man who would never steer him wrong. But now, all of that felt like it was slipping away. You're telling me you've been doing all this for me? Jamal asked, his voice trembling with emotion. By hiding this from me? By not being honest with me? I don't know what to believe anymore, Dad. You've been telling me to be honest, to always do the right thing, and then you've been living a double life. What does that say about you? What does that say about everything you've taught me? Vin ran a hand through his hair, his face contorting with guilt. I never wanted you to be part of that world, Jamal. It's not a place for a kid like you. I thought I could keep you safe from it, keep you out of it for good. But I see now that I've made mistakes. I should have told you sooner, but I didn't know how. I didn't know how to protect you from the truth without hurting you. Jamal stood there, staring at his father, trying to process everything. His father wasn't some untouchable hero anymore. He was just a man, with flaws, with secrets, with a past he couldn't escape. Jamal didn't know if he could forgive him, but he also didn't know if he could walk away from him. I don't know what to do with this, Dad, Jamal said quietly, his voice breaking slightly. I don't know how to move forward from here. But you have to understand, I don't want to be like you. I don't want to be involved in whatever this is. Vin's eyes softened, and he took a step forward. I understand. I do. But you don't have to be like me, Jamal. You can still choose your own path. I know I've made mistakes, but you don't have to carry that burden. Jamal took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing thoughts. His dad had just told him everything that Jamal had suspected but hadn't fully understood until now. It was a lot to take in, too much to process all at once. But the one thing he did know was this: his father wasn't a villain. He wasn't a bad man. He was just a man who had been caught up in a world he couldn't leave. But that didn't mean Jamal had to follow him down that path. Jamal had a choice. A choice to break free from the cycle, to make a better life for himself. I need time, Dad, Jamal said, his voice steady again. I need time to figure this out. I need space to think about what I want my future to look like. Vin nodded slowly, his face a mixture of relief and sadness. I get it, son. Take all the time you need. I just hope you know I'm here, no matter what you decide. Jamal turned and walked toward the door, the weight of the conversation still pressing on him. But this time, he didn't feel like he was being dragged into his father's world. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he had control over his own future. The path ahead wasn't clear, but Jamal knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to let anyone else dictate his life. Not even his dad. As he stepped outside into the cool night air, Jamal took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders, but for the first time, it felt like he had the strength to carry it. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The days that followed the confrontation with his father felt like a blur. Jamal tried to return to some semblance of normal life, but the heavy weight of the secrets he had just uncovered kept him on edge. It wasn't like he could just forget what he had learned about his dad. How could he? The image he had once had of the man who had raised him, taught him right from wrong, had been shattered. Jamal knew now that his father had been living a life full of shadows, darkness that Jamal hadn't wanted to see, but now, he couldn't unsee. At school, things weren't much better. He couldn't focus on his studies, his thoughts constantly drifting back to the conversation with his dad. The questions kept piling up in his mind. What was he supposed to do now? Should he walk away from his father, cut all ties with him and the dangerous world Marcus had pulled him into? Or was there a way for him to help his father get out of it, to pull him out of the mess without risking everything in the process? Then there was the matter of his relationship with his friends. After all the chaos with Madison and the bullying, Jamal had hoped things would calm down. But it felt like everything was just getting more complicated. His phone buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. He glanced at it. It was a message from Marcus. "Meet me after school. We need to talk." Jamal stared at the message for a long moment. He had no idea what Marcus wanted now, but he couldn't keep avoiding him. If Marcus was really trying to help his father, then he needed to hear him out. But part of him dreaded what might happen next. He had just come to terms with the fact that his dad was involved in things he couldn't control, but now, he was being dragged deeper into a web he wasn't sure he was ready to untangle. After school, Jamal walked down the quiet street towards the designated meeting spot. It was a small, nondescript coffee shop on the edge of town, a place where the two of them could talk without attracting too much attention. Jamal had been there a handful of times before, but it always felt like a place for quiet conversations, a space where people could escape from the noise of the world outside. Today, though, the air felt heavy with anticipation. As he stepped inside, he saw Marcus sitting at a back booth, tapping his fingers nervously on the table. He looked up when Jamal entered, his usual cocky smile replaced by something more serious. "Glad you could make it," Marcus said, motioning for Jamal to sit down. Jamal slid into the seat across from him, his eyes narrowed. "What's this about? What do you want, Marcus?" Marcus leaned in, his voice dropping to a lower, more urgent tone. "It's about your dad. And about the people who are still watching him. Things are escalating. And I don't think he fully understands what he's dealing with." Jamal's stomach churned. "What do you mean? What's going on? I thought you said he was trying to get out of all of this." "He is," Marcus said quickly, glancing around the room as if checking for eavesdroppers. "But it's not that simple. You don't just walk away from people like that. There's too much at stake. And now, there are people who want him back in. People who won't take no for an answer. People who will do whatever it takes to make sure he comes back to the fold." Jamal's pulse quickened. "So, you're telling me my dad's in danger?" "Not just him," Marcus said, his gaze locking onto Jamal's. "You, too. You're involved now, whether you like it or not. You don't think those people don't know about you? They know who you are. They know you're his son. And they're not going to let anyone, especially not you, stand in the way of their plans." Jamal felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The idea that his life was now at risk because of his father's actions was too much to bear. "What are we supposed to do about it?" he asked, his voice a mix of frustration and fear. Marcus paused, his fingers still tapping nervously on the table. "We need to be smart about this. If you want to keep your dad safe, if you want to keep yourself safe, you have to stop playing by the rules. The world your dad's in, well, it's not the kind of place where rules matter." Jamal shook his head, trying to process what Marcus was saying. "You want me to break the rules? To join in with whatever dangerous game you're playing?" No, Marcus said, leaning back and raising his hands in defense. I'm not asking you to join the game. But I'm telling you that if you don't start understanding the stakes, if you don't start thinking like them, your dad's going to get caught up in something he can't escape. And you'll be caught in the middle of it, too. Jamal sat back, the weight of Marcus's words settling in his chest. The room felt like it was spinning. He wanted to trust Marcus, but every instinct he had told him to be careful. Marcus wasn't the guy who could fix things. He was part of the problem. But what other choice did Jamal have? Could he really sit back and do nothing while his dad's life, and his own, was on the line? What do you want me to do? Jamal asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He didn't like it, but the question had already escaped. He was already in this deeper than he ever imagined. Marcus's eyes softened. I don't know if you'll be able to do much, Jamal. But I do know this, you need to keep your eyes open. You need to be aware of everything happening around you. Because if you don't, you're going to be the one who ends up paying the price. The silence between them felt suffocating as Jamal absorbed the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just about his dad anymore. It was about his own survival. I'll keep my eyes open, Jamal finally said, his voice steady, though his heart was racing. But I'm not doing anything illegal, Marcus. You hear me? Marcus nodded, but there was something in his eyes that made Jamal wonder if he truly believed that was possible. As Jamal left the coffee shop, his mind was spinning. He didn't know what to believe anymore. His father had tried to protect him, but in doing so, had led him straight into a situation he wasn't prepared for. And now, there was no turning back. His life, and his father's, were tangled up in something dangerous, and Jamal didn't know if they could ever escape. The following days felt like they were moving in slow motion. Jamal couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. The weight of his conversation with Marcus kept hanging over him, gnawing at the back of his mind. Every time he stepped foot outside his house, every time he saw someone walking by, his eyes would dart around, paranoid, wondering if someone was watching him. Was someone following him? Was Marcus right? Were there really people out there who wanted to hurt his family? At school, it was no better. Jamal couldn't concentrate on his assignments, couldn't focus on his friends. He was too distracted, too tangled up in the mess his life had become. His thoughts kept circling back to one question: how far would his father go to protect him? And how far would Jamal go to protect his father? It was Wednesday afternoon, and Jamal had just finished his final class of the day. He was about to head home when he received another text from Marcus. Meet me at the usual spot. It's urgent. Jamal's stomach dropped. It was the middle of the school day, and he knew he couldn't afford to waste any more time on whatever Marcus had planned. But curiosity, and a sense of duty to his dad, drove him forward. He couldn't just sit around and wait. He needed answers. He grabbed his backpack and headed for the back exit of the school, slipping into the alleyway behind the building. He'd learned to avoid the main road when Marcus called. It was better to keep things low-key, especially now. He didn't know who he could trust. As Jamal walked the familiar path to the alley near the coffee shop, his heart began to race. What was this about? What new danger had Marcus stumbled upon? He had a bad feeling in the pit of his stomach. He arrived at the usual spot, a grimy, unassuming parking lot behind an old, abandoned building. It was always empty, quiet. Perfect for meetings like this. Marcus was standing there, his arms crossed, his face more serious than Jamal had ever seen. It only made Jamal more nervous. Jamal, Marcus said, his voice low, you're gonna want to listen closely. This isn't just about your dad anymore. This is bigger. Way bigger. Jamal's brow furrowed. What are you talking about? What's going on? Marcus took a deep breath before answering. I've been digging. I've been talking to people, trying to figure out how deep this goes. And I'm telling you right now, your dad's in serious danger. But so are you. They know who you are. They know about your connection to him. And they've got their eyes on you. Jamal's heart raced. Who? Who's after us? Who's behind all of this? Marcus hesitated. For a moment, Jamal thought he might not answer, but then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. It's the syndicate. They're the ones who've been pulling the strings all along. The people your dad's been involved with, they're not just small-time criminals. This is an international operation. And your dad got out at the wrong time. Now, they want him back, and they want him bad. They'll do anything to get him back in the fold. Jamal's stomach churned. He had heard the term syndicate before, in passing, on the news, but he never thought it was anything more than a distant, shadowy criminal group. But now, hearing Marcus speak about them, Jamal realized just how serious this was. His father wasn't just tangled in some street-level drama. He was dealing with people who had far-reaching power, people who could ruin lives without a second thought. Wait, Jamal said, his voice rising in disbelief, what do you mean, get him back? I thought my dad was out. I thought he was trying to leave all that behind. Marcus looked at him with cold, hard eyes. Your dad might think he's out, but the syndicate doesn't let people leave. Not unless they're dead. He made a deal with them once, years ago. And they've been keeping tabs on him ever since. The moment he tried to walk away, they decided they needed him back. And they're willing to do whatever it takes to make that happen. Jamal ran his hand through his hair, trying to process the information. So what does this mean for me? What do I do? I can't just sit here and wait for them to come for us, Marcus. I need to know what to do. Marcus sighed, his expression softening. I know this is a lot, Jamal. But the only way to stay ahead of them is to stay alert. You need to be careful about who you trust. You need to watch your back, because these people, they don't play by the rules. And if they think you're getting in the way of their plans, they won't hesitate to take you down. Jamal's thoughts were a whirlwind. His father had been right, he couldn't just ignore the reality of the situation. He had to step up. He couldn't let his dad get dragged back into that world, not when they had so much to lose. And what happens if they come after us? Jamal asked quietly. What if they don't stop? What if my dad gets caught in their grip again? Marcus's face darkened. That's the risk we're facing. Your dad might think he can protect you, but it's not just about keeping you safe anymore. They're going to come for everything, Jamal. They'll use whatever they have against him, and they'll use you, too, if it means getting what they want. Jamal stood there in stunned silence, his mind reeling. His world was quickly falling apart. Every choice he made now carried consequences that could affect not only him but his family as well. Look, Marcus said after a long pause, I know you want to protect your dad, but you can't do it alone. You need help. We need to take action before it's too late. There are people who owe me favors, people who can help us fight back. But we need to be strategic. This isn't something you can just muscle through on your own. Jamal's mind was racing. He hated the idea of getting deeper into this mess, but the truth was, he had no choice. If he wanted to protect his father, if he wanted to keep them both alive, he needed to do whatever it took. I'm in, Jamal said, his voice firm. I'll do whatever it takes. But we do this on our terms. We don't go down without a fight. Marcus nodded, a glimmer of approval in his eyes. That's what I like to hear. We'll figure this out, together. As Jamal turned to leave, he felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. There was no going back. The game had changed, and now he had to play by a whole new set of rules. But one thing was certain, Jamal wasn't going down without a fight. Not for his father. Not for himself. The following days felt like they were moving faster than Jamal could process. The weight of the decisions he was making pressed down on him with every passing hour. There was no turning back now. He had committed to helping Marcus, and with every word they exchanged, the stakes seemed to get higher. As much as he hated to admit it, Jamal knew he couldn't protect his father on his own. But that didn't mean he liked the path Marcus was leading them down. Marcus had started bringing him into the fold of his plan. Meetings with shady contacts, cryptic phone calls, and long discussions in places where the walls felt like they were closing and were becoming a part of Jamal's reality. It wasn't the world he was used to, the world of school, friends, and basketball practice, but it was the world he had to navigate now if he wanted to survive. Jamal had spent the past few days trying to act normal. He attended classes, ate lunch with his friends, and kept up appearances. But on the inside, things were spiraling. He couldn't stop thinking about what Marcus had said. About the syndicate. About how they had their eyes on him. Every noise, every shadow, every unfamiliar car driving by felt like a threat. He was constantly looking over his shoulder, trying to stay one step ahead. He hadn't told anyone about what was going on. Not even his closest friends knew the full extent of the danger he and his father were in. They knew Jamal had been acting weird, but he couldn't bring himself to share the terrifying truth. No one could understand. They'd think he was overreacting. Or worse, they'd worry about him, and that was the last thing he wanted. He couldn't burden them with this. Not when he was already drowning in it. Jamal sat in his room one night, staring at his phone screen. It was past midnight, and he hadn't heard from Marcus in hours. A sudden buzz broke the silence, and his heart skipped. It was a message from Marcus. "We need to meet. It's urgent. Bring your dad." Jamal's stomach sank. He had no idea what Marcus meant by that. Bring his dad. That was risky. His father was already trying to lay low after the confrontation in the alley. But something in Jamal's gut told him this wasn't just another check-in. This was something bigger. The text had come through from an unknown number, and Jamal didn't trust it. But at this point, trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. His father had made it clear that they needed to keep moving forward, even if they didn't fully understand the threats they were facing. Jamal quickly sent a reply. "What's going on? Why do I need to bring my dad?" The response came almost immediately. "We don't have much time. Just trust me. It's the only way." That was all Marcus said. Jamal read the message again, then put his phone down. He couldn't make sense of it. His mind raced. What did Marcus mean? Was he really asking him to involve his father in all of this? A part of Jamal wanted to tell his dad about the message, but the last thing he wanted to do was put his father in even more danger. But Marcus was right about one thing, there wasn't much time. And if this really was as serious as Marcus claimed, Jamal knew they needed to act fast. There was no room for second-guessing. The next morning, Jamal sat down with his dad at breakfast, his mind spinning. His father, as usual, was quiet and distant, as if still lost in the weight of his own thoughts. Jamal could tell he wasn't himself, and it only added to the tension between them. "Hey, Dad," Jamal said, hesitating before continuing. "I got a message from Marcus last night. He says we need to meet with him. It's urgent." His father looked up from his coffee, his expression unreadable. "Marcus?" he asked, voice flat. "What does he want?" "I don't know," Jamal replied. "But he says we need to go together. I don't really know what's going on, but it sounds like we don't have much time." His father put his mug down slowly, his eyes narrowing. "I don't like this, Jamal," he said, his voice low and firm. "We've been through enough. I don't want you dragged any deeper into this." "I don't want to be," Jamal shot back, frustration bubbling up inside him. "But I don't know what else to do. If Marcus is right, we're running out of time." His father's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Jamal saw a flicker of something, guilt? Worry? He couldn't tell. But before he could say anything more, his father exhaled sharply. "All right," he said reluctantly. "We'll meet him. But this better be important, Jamal. You're not getting any deeper into this than you already are. Jamal nodded, relief washing over him. He didn't want to fight his dad. Not like this. But at least they were on the same page. For now. They met Marcus at a secluded warehouse on the outskirts of town, a place Jamal had never been before. The building was run down, its windows cracked and dirty, the rusted metal gates barely hanging on their hinges. It looked like a place no one would ever visit on purpose. Jamal's heart pounded in his chest as he stepped inside with his dad. The warehouse was eerily quiet, the air thick with dust and the scent of oil and metal. Marcus stood near the back, talking to someone in low tones. When he saw Jamal and his dad approach, he straightened and waved them over. "Glad you could make it," Marcus said, his voice tense. He looked over at Jamal's dad, his expression harder than usual. "I didn't want to drag you into this, but things are moving fast. You need to know what's going on." Jamal's dad crossed his arms, his face hard. "Start talking." Marcus glanced around, making sure no one else was listening, before he spoke in a hushed tone. "The syndicate is getting impatient. They're not just after you anymore, they're after everyone connected to you. I've been talking to my contacts, and they've got a plan to bring you back into their operation. They'll do anything to get you back, and they'll stop at nothing to make sure they succeed." Jamal's father stiffened, his expression darkening. "What do they want from me?" "Everything," Marcus replied. "They want you back in their network, and they want your expertise. They need you for something big. Something that will make them millions. But if you don't cooperate, they'll start making things personal. They'll hurt people you love." Jamal's chest tightened, the words sinking in like a sharp knife. It was happening. Everything his dad had tried to protect him from was coming to a head. Marcus's eyes flicked to Jamal, and for the first time, Jamal saw a flicker of something softer in them, a trace of regret. "I didn't want to get you involved, man," Marcus said, his voice quieter now. "But you're in this now. You have to stay sharp. There's no going back." Jamal swallowed hard, trying to push down the fear threatening to overwhelm him. "What do we do now?" Marcus exhaled sharply. "Now we fight. We don't have a choice anymore." The tension in the air felt almost suffocating as Jamal stood in the warehouse, listening to Marcus's words. His father's face was hard, his jaw clenched, but Jamal could see the weight of the situation starting to settle in on him. Marcus was right, there was no turning back. They were in this together now, whether they liked it or not. But the questions that haunted Jamal didn't just linger in the back of his mind anymore, they were front and center, louder than ever. What had his father been involved in before? Why had he stayed away from it for so long? Why hadn't he told Jamal the full truth? And most importantly, who could they trust in all of this? As Marcus finished speaking, Jamal couldn't shake the cold, anxious feeling in the pit of his stomach. His father's past was dark, a world Jamal hadn't known about until now, and that darkness was creeping closer, inch by inch. "We need a plan," his father said, breaking the silence. His voice was steady, but there was a hard edge to it that Jamal didn't miss. "Marcus, tell me everything. Who are we really dealing with here?" Marcus shifted his weight, glancing around the dimly lit warehouse. The syndicate isn't just a street gang or a small-time operation. They've got their hands in everything: drugs, weapons, money laundering, even politics. They're everywhere, and they've got people in places you wouldn't believe. But the worst part is, they're ruthless. They don't care about who gets hurt. They don't care about anyone but themselves. Jamal's father ran a hand through his hair, frustration clear in his features. "I never wanted you to be part of this, Jamal. You're not ready for what's coming. I should have protected you better. I never should have gotten involved in the first place." Jamal's heart twisted at his father's words, the pain in his eyes cutting through him like a blade. His dad had always tried to be a protector, always been the strong one, but now Jamal could see the cracks in that armor. His father was just as scared as he was, maybe more. And that realization left Jamal with a bitter taste in his mouth. "Don't blame yourself," Jamal said, trying to steady his voice, though it shook with emotion. "You did what you had to do. We're in this together now, okay? We're going to figure it out. We just have to stay focused." His father nodded slowly, but his eyes were distant. Jamal didn't know if his father truly believed it, but he had to hold on to that hope. They didn't have time to crumble now. Marcus stepped forward, his eyes locked on them both. "Okay, here's the deal. We don't have the luxury of waiting around. The syndicate is already making moves. They've got people watching you, Jamal. They've been following your every step since you started this mess." Jamal felt a chill crawl up his spine. "What do you mean, watching me?" "Exactly that," Marcus replied grimly. "They know about you now, and they won't hesitate to use you to get to your dad. If they think they can leverage you, they will. They know the way you're connected to him, and they'll exploit that. So, the best thing you can do right now is stay out of the public eye. Stay low, stay quiet. Don't trust anyone who doesn't have your back." Jamal swallowed hard, his mind racing. The thought of someone watching him all the time, tracking his every move, made his skin crawl. How was he supposed to go about his normal life, pretending like everything was okay, when his every step could be under surveillance? "That's why we need to stay ahead of them," Marcus continued. "We can't just hide and wait. We have to strike first, before they get to us." Jamal's father looked at Marcus, his expression hardening. "What do you suggest we do?" Marcus glanced around the room, clearly weighing his options. "We gather intel. We find out where the syndicate's operation is based, who the key players are, and we expose them. We take them down from the inside. But we can't do that unless we're prepared. And we need a team. We need people we can trust." Jamal's father shook his head. "We don't have time to put together a team, Marcus. We don't even know who we can trust anymore." Marcus's face softened. "I know, but it's the only way. You can't fight this war alone, not when they've got people everywhere. I've got some contacts who owe me favors. They've been on the inside for years, and they know how the syndicate works. If we move fast, we can take the fight to them before they come for us." Jamal felt his stomach tighten with the weight of the decision before him. His father was right, they couldn't fight this alone. They didn't have the resources, the manpower, or the knowledge to take on an organization as powerful as the syndicate. They needed help, no matter how dangerous it felt. "Okay," Jamal said, his voice shaky but determined. "Let's do it. Let's take them down." His father looked at him, eyes full of concern and pride. "You don't know what you're asking, Jamal. This is going to get ugly. There's no way around that. People are going to get hurt." "I know," Jamal replied quietly. "But we don't have a choice. If we don't fight now, we lose everything. And I won't let that happen." There was a long pause, and for a moment, it felt like the weight of the world was pressing down on them. But in that moment, Jamal knew something had shifted. He wasn't just his father's son anymore. He was a part of this fight. And whatever came next, he would face it head-on. "All right," his father finally said, his voice steady again. "Let's get to work. We'll do it your way, but we do it smart. No more mistakes." Marcus nodded. "Good. We've got a lot to do, and not much time. Let's make sure we're ready for whatever comes next." Jamal spent the next few days buried in meetings with Marcus's contacts, learning everything he could about the syndicate's operations. It felt like diving into a world that was beyond his comprehension, but he knew this was the only way to get out alive. Every day brought new information, new dangers, new enemies, and new pieces to the puzzle. Jamal couldn't stop thinking about what Marcus had said: the syndicate doesn't care about anyone. They'll use whoever they need to get what they want. That thought kept him up at night. He couldn't let them use him. He couldn't let them use his family. As he prepared for the battle ahead, Jamal knew there was no going back. The storm was coming, and he had to be ready to face it, no matter the cost. The night had fallen thick and heavy over the city, and Jamal sat in his room, the faint hum of his computer screen the only light in the otherwise dark space. His thoughts kept circling back to Marcus's words. The syndicate will use you. He couldn't shake the feeling that his every step was being watched, that even the most mundane decisions could set off a chain reaction he couldn't control. It felt like being trapped in a maze, with no way out. But the thought of running or hiding wasn't an option anymore. He had no choice but to push forward. His father had made it clear that they were in this together. So, Jamal had to hold on, even when the weight of the situation seemed like it might crush him. His phone buzzed on the desk, breaking his thoughts. He picked it up and saw a message from Marcus. We have a lead. Meet me in an hour at the usual spot. Bring your dad. Things are about to get real. Jamal didn't hesitate. He tossed the phone aside and stood up, pulling on his jacket. The cold air outside felt like a slap to the face as he walked down the hallway to find his dad. He didn't have to look far, his father was sitting at the kitchen table, drinking coffee as he stared into the distance, lost in thought. Dad, Jamal said, trying to steady his nerves, Marcus has something. We need to go. His father looked up at him, eyes heavy with exhaustion but still sharp. I figured it was coming. Let's get this over with. The ride to the meeting spot was quiet, the weight of the coming storm hanging between them. The usual spot was an abandoned warehouse near the docks, a place that was as grim and desolate as the situation they were facing. It had always been a place for clandestine dealings, but now it felt like a place where decisions would be made that could change everything. When they arrived, Marcus was already waiting. He was standing by a rusty metal door, his posture tense, his eyes scanning the surroundings like a hawk. As soon as he saw them, he motioned them over. You're late, he said in a low, clipped voice, not bothering with pleasantries. Not by much, Jamal's father shot back, stepping forward with a coolness that belied the anxiety radiating off him. We don't have much time, Marcus continued, his voice serious now. I got the info we need, but it's going to make things worse before it gets better. Jamal's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? Marcus glanced over at Jamal's father, then back at Jamal. You two are going to need to stay sharp. The syndicate has eyes on you, Jamal. Not just you, but your father too. They know where you are, and they're closing in fast. Jamal felt his stomach twist into knots. Are you saying they're here? Now. Marcus nodded, his face grim. They have people everywhere, and they're ready to move in. The moment they see any sign of weakness, they'll strike. Jamal's father stiffened. What's the plan, Marcus? Marcus turned and began walking toward the back of the warehouse, gesturing for them to follow. I've been tracking the syndicate's movements. They've set up shop in a location near here, someplace they think is off the radar. But we know better. We're going to hit them before they have the chance to hit us. Jamal felt a wave of unease wash over him. He'd heard stories of the syndicate's operations, how they didn't just deal in drugs and weapons, but in intimidation, power, and manipulation. The people involved weren't just criminals, they were experts in creating fear, breaking down their targets piece by piece. The idea of going after them made Jamal feel like he was stepping into a battle he was too young for, too naive to fully understand. We don't know where they're hiding, Jamal's father said, his voice cautious. We don't even know how many of them there are. That's why we need to move quickly, Marcus replied, a determined edge in his voice. We've got eyes on their safe house, and I've got a team ready to infiltrate. But we'll need you to be the distraction, Jamal. You're the key to making this work. Jamal froze. What do you mean, distract them? You'll draw their attention, Marcus explained. The moment they start focusing on you, we'll make our move. But it has to be you, Jamal. You've got a reputation, and they're going to see you as a threat. They'll underestimate you. Jamal's pulse quickened. I don't know if I can. Jamal, his father interjected, his voice steady but firm. This is the only way. If you can get them to focus on you, even for a moment, it'll give Marcus and his team the opening they need. Jamal hesitated. His father was right, but that didn't make the idea of being bait any less terrifying. He felt exposed, like the whole world was waiting for him to make a mistake, just so they could pounce. I'll do it, Jamal said finally, the words feeling foreign even as they left his mouth. He didn't know if he was more terrified of the syndicate or the idea of failing his father. Marcus clapped a hand on Jamal's shoulder, a gesture of support, though it felt more like a warning. Good. But you need to stay focused. You don't get a second chance in this world. Jamal nodded, swallowing the fear in his throat. He was in too deep now to back out. The plan was set, and they spent the next hour going over the details. Marcus's team would be in position, waiting for Jamal's signal. The moment they had their opening, they would storm the safe house, neutralize the syndicate's people, and hopefully, take down the operation from the inside. It was a risky plan, full of potential hazards, but it was the only option they had. As they made their way to the location, Jamal's mind raced. The pressure of the situation had him on edge, his thoughts bouncing between survival and the looming danger of failure. He couldn't afford to screw this up, not when everything depended on him. They arrived at a rundown apartment complex on the outskirts of town, the area dark and uninviting. The building stood tall and silent, its windows broken in some places, with an aura of neglect hanging in the air. Jamal's eyes scanned the structure, his pulse quickening as he realized they were close. This was it. The place where everything could either fall apart or come together. Marcus, his father, and the rest of the team spread out, positioning themselves in key spots around the building. Jamal stood a few feet away, feeling the weight of every single person's eyes on him. He couldn't back out now. Stay sharp, Marcus said, his voice low as he handed Jamal a small earpiece. When the time comes, you need to move fast. Get them to follow you, but don't go too far. We'll be right behind you. Jamal nodded, slipping the earpiece into his ear and taking a deep breath. The cold air seemed to freeze in his lungs as he looked up at the building. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to stand on the edge of a precipice, knowing there was no way back. Let's do this, Jamal whispered to himself, trying to summon every ounce of courage he had left. And with that, he stepped forward. Jamal's heart pounded as he walked toward the rundown apartment complex, each step heavy with the weight of the moment. The dark shadows cast by the building seemed to mock him, a foreboding reminder of the dangers that lurked just around the corner. He could feel his palms sweating despite the chill in the air, and his mind kept racing through the plan, trying to lock every detail into place. Move fast. Get their attention. Don't go too far. We'll be behind you. The words Marcus had said earlier echoed in his ears, and Jamal couldn't help but think about the risk. Every instinct screamed at him to back off, to find a safer route, to find another way. But there was no turning back now. His father was counting on him, Marcus was counting on him, and most importantly, Jamal knew that if he didn't do this, they were all going to lose. He reached the entrance of the building and paused, glancing over his shoulder to make sure his father and the rest of Marcus's team were in place. His father, a few yards behind him, stood like a silent sentinel, eyes sharp, scanning the surroundings for any movement. Marcus and his team were strategically positioned, hiding in the shadows, waiting for Jamal's cue. The earpiece crackled with Marcus's voice, low but urgent. Jamal, it's time. Get in there. Start the distraction. Jamal swallowed hard and nodded, though no one could see it. His hand gripped the edge of his jacket tighter, and with one last deep breath, he stepped into the building, the door creaking open under his touch. The dim light inside made the hallway feel even more claustrophobic, as if the walls themselves were closing in on him. He moved quickly, trying to ignore the cold sweat forming on his brow. His mind was a whirl of strategy, danger, and one single goal: make them notice him. The syndicate's people were here, and Jamal had to make them think he was the one in control. He had to make them believe they were the ones chasing him, not the other way around. As he walked deeper into the building, the sound of his footsteps echoed off the cracked walls. He could hear the faint murmur of voices ahead, and his pulse quickened. He knew they were close now, he could feel it in his bones. But there was no time to hesitate. He had to act. He had to force their hand. A door to his left creaked open, and Jamal froze. He didn't need to see who it was, he could feel the presence on the other side of the door. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He wasn't alone anymore. Someone had spotted him. Well, well. What do we have here? A voice said from the shadows. It was low, smooth, and laced with a hint of mockery. Jamal's heart skipped a beat as a tall man emerged from the shadows. His features were sharp, eyes cold and calculating. He wore a black leather jacket, his hands tucked in his pockets like he wasn't worried about a thing in the world. This was no ordinary thug. This was someone who knew exactly how to handle business. You must be the one everyone's been talking about, the man continued, his voice low, eyes narrowing as they scanned Jamal. The boy who thinks he can take us down. Jamal stood his ground, despite the fear that was clawing at his insides. I'm not here for you. I'm here for the syndicate. The man's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. Is that right? Well, you've come to the wrong place, kid. Without warning, the man lunged at Jamal, his hand reaching for his throat. But Jamal was quick, sidestepping just in time. The man's momentum sent him crashing into the wall, giving Jamal the opening he needed. He didn't wait to see if the man would get up. He had a job to do. Jamal bolted forward, making his way down the hallway with the sound of heavy footsteps following close behind. He could hear the man cursing, his voice echoing through the building, and Jamal's adrenaline spiked. He had to keep moving. He had to keep them chasing him. Come on. Jamal muttered to himself, sweat now streaming down his face. This is it. He rounded a corner and spotted a few more men coming toward him. Their eyes widened as they saw him, and Jamal didn't hesitate. He darted toward an open door, slamming it shut behind him as the men tried to follow. For a brief moment, there was silence. Then, a voice came over the earpiece. Jamal, you need to move faster. We're losing them. They're regrouping. He could hear Marcus's urgency, and the reality of what he was doing hit him all at once. This wasn't just a distraction. This was real. And if he made one wrong move, if he slipped up even once, the entire plan could fall apart. The men outside banged on the door, and Jamal's mind raced. He needed to stay calm, to stay in control. He could hear his father's voice in his head, steady and unshaken, reminding him that they couldn't afford to make mistakes. Suddenly, Jamal's phone buzzed in his pocket, and he pulled it out, seeing a message from Marcus. We've got eyes on the safe house. Stay on them. Don't let them escape. Jamal's fingers trembled as he typed back. I'm in position. I've got them. He took a deep breath and turned back toward the door. The sound of the men outside was growing louder. They were getting closer. His heart raced, but he had no choice but to face it head-on. He pushed open the door slightly, just enough to see the men pacing outside, waiting for him to make a move. And then, as if by instinct, Jamal made his move. He darted to the left, sprinting toward a staircase that led to the upper floors. His ears rang with the sound of boots pounding behind him, but he kept running, faster now, desperate to get out of their reach. He wasn't just running to survive, he was running to win. The team outside was in position. His father, Marcus, they were all waiting for him to deliver the opening they needed. Jamal's role wasn't just to be bait. He was the spark that would ignite the fire, and he had to make sure it caught. By the time he reached the top floor, his legs were burning with exhaustion, but he didn't stop. He could hear the shouts of the men behind him, getting closer and closer. The final trap was set. Jamal's lungs burned, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he sprinted up the stairs of the old apartment complex. The sound of the syndicate's men chasing him echoed in the narrow stairwell, growing louder with each step. His heart hammered in his chest, thudding so hard it felt like it might burst. His legs screamed in protest, but he pushed on, driven by the weight of everything that was riding on this moment. Stay focused. Stay calm. The mantra repeated in his mind as he neared the top floor. His body was on autopilot now, the adrenaline driving him forward even though his muscles were begging for respite. He rounded the corner, barely noticing the dim lighting, the peeling wallpaper, or the cracked windows. His mind was singular, locked onto the mission. At the top of the stairs, Jamal threw open the door to a small, cramped hallway. He could hear the men below, cursing and muttering as they continued their pursuit. It was only a matter of time before they caught up with him, and when that happened, the whole plan could collapse. He was almost there, just a few more steps, and he would be in position to give the signal. He hoped Marcus and the team were ready. There was no turning back now. Just as he was about to round another corner, he froze. A shadow appeared in the hallway ahead of him, followed by the unmistakable sound of boots hitting the floor. Someone else was here. Someone who wasn't part of the plan. A chill ran down Jamal's spine. He was cornered. "Got you," a voice rang out from the shadows, its cold, mocking tone sending a shiver through Jamal's body. He turned, just in time to see a figure step out from behind a broken doorframe. The man was tall, wearing a dark, hooded jacket that obscured most of his face. But Jamal could make out the glint of a gun in his hand, aimed directly at him. The man's eyes locked with Jamal's. There was something cold and calculating in those eyes, like he knew exactly who Jamal was and what he was capable of. "You're the boy they sent to stir up trouble, huh?" the man said, a cruel smirk twisting his lips. "I don't know if I should be impressed or annoyed. Either way, you're not going anywhere." Jamal's heart raced, but he didn't let the fear show. Instead, he forced his voice to steady. "I'm not afraid of you." The man chuckled darkly, stepping closer. "You should be. But don't worry, I won't kill you. Not yet. We're going to have some fun first." Jamal's instincts screamed at him to run, to make a break for it, but he knew that wasn't an option. Not anymore. He needed to stay focused, stay in control. He couldn't afford to let fear dictate his actions. He took a deep breath and shifted his stance, positioning himself as if he was ready to fight. The man raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Not bad," the man said, the gun still trained on Jamal. "But you're wasting your time. You can't escape. You're trapped." Suddenly, the door behind the man creaked open, and Jamal's heart skipped a beat. A voice shouted from inside the room, followed by the sound of rapid footsteps. Before the man could react, the figure of Marcus emerged from the shadows, moving faster than Jamal had ever seen him. "Get down!" Marcus shouted. Without thinking, Jamal dove to the ground, rolling to the side just as Marcus launched himself at the man. The gunshot that followed rang in Jamal's ears, but it wasn't directed at him. Instead, it was aimed at Marcus, the bullet missing him by inches as he took the man down with a swift, calculated move. Jamal scrambled to his feet, watching in awe as Marcus subdued the man in mere seconds, pinning him to the ground with a firm grip. The gun slid out of the man's hand and clattered across the floor. "Stay down," Marcus muttered, his voice low and dangerous as he pressed the man's head into the floor. "You should have known better than to mess with us." Jamal blinked, his body still buzzing with the adrenaline of the close call. He wiped his brow, barely able to process what had just happened. He'd almost been caught. The plan had almost been destroyed before it even got started. "Thanks," Jamal said, his voice shaky, though he did his best to sound calm. No time for thanks, Marcus replied, his tone sharp. We still have work to do. Before Jamal could respond, he heard a muffled voice crackling through the earpiece in his ear. Jamal, where are you? We've got company. Jamal's eyes widened. What do you mean? Who? It's the syndicate, his father's voice came through. They're here. They found us. Panic flared in Jamal's chest, but Marcus was already pulling him toward the exit, his face grim. We need to go. Now, Marcus said urgently. Jamal didn't need to be told twice. He followed Marcus through the hallway, his feet pounding against the floor as they moved toward the staircase. Every step felt like it could be their last. The tension in the air was thick, oppressive, and Jamal couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was coming, something that neither he nor Marcus could control. As they reached the stairwell, Jamal could hear the sounds of people running, shouting orders. It wasn't just the men who had been chasing him anymore. The entire syndicate was on alert, and they were closing in fast. Marcus didn't break stride, pulling Jamal along with him. We're not going to make it through the front. We need to find another way out. Jamal nodded, his mind racing. The back door, he remembered it. It led out to a narrow alley, but it was their only option. They had to move quickly. Come on. Marcus shouted as they made a sharp turn down a side hallway, their footsteps echoing in the empty building. They reached the back door just as the sound of boots began to thunder up the stairs behind them. Marcus kicked the door open, revealing the dark alley beyond. The cold night air hit Jamal's face like a slap, and he gasped, the fresh air filling his lungs. But their relief was short-lived. The alley was blocked. Syndicate members had already set up a perimeter. Jamal's stomach sank. Stay low, Marcus whispered, pushing Jamal against the wall as more figures emerged from the shadows, surrounding the alley. Jamal's heart was in his throat. They were trapped. Completely surrounded. But there was one thing Jamal knew for sure now, this wasn't the end. Not yet. Jamal pressed himself against the cold brick wall of the alley, his heart thumping in his chest like a drum. The cold night air felt sharp against his skin, but it did nothing to ease the fire of panic surging through him. He could hear them now, the syndicate's men, moving in slowly but purposefully, surrounding the alley in a perfect circle. The sounds of their boots scraping against the gravel and the faint shuffle of leather jackets sent shivers down Jamal's spine. Marcus had his back against the wall, too, his eyes scanning the perimeter, calculating the odds, trying to figure out their next move. He didn't look worried, not the way Jamal felt, anyway. But Jamal could see the tightness in Marcus's jaw, the way his hands subtly gripped the sides of his jacket as if he were preparing for the worst. We're not going to make it out of here, are we? Jamal whispered, his voice barely audible against the din of the encroaching danger. Marcus shot him a sharp look. You're not thinking that way right now, Jamal. We don't have time to think that way. Jamal opened his mouth to protest, to argue that it didn't look good, but he was interrupted by a harsh, commanding voice from the end of the alley. Well, what do we have here? The voice was familiar, cold, confident, and laced with a mocking tone. It was the man from earlier, the one who had nearly caught Jamal in the hallway of the apartment complex. Jamal's blood ran cold. The man was tall, wearing a leather jacket, his face obscured by the dim lighting. He stepped into view, flanked by two others who were just as imposing, both carrying weapons. You're a persistent little one, the man continued, his eyes flicking between Jamal and Marcus. But persistence won't save you. It never does. Marcus tensed beside Jamal, and for the first time, Jamal saw a flicker of doubt in Marcus's eyes. The situation was bad. Really bad. We're not your enemies, Marcus said, his voice steady. You don't want to do this. The man laughed, a low, cruel sound that echoed in the alley. Oh, I think you're wrong about that. You've crossed us, and now, there's no going back. Jamal could see the shift in the man's eyes, the resolve that came with the realization that he wasn't dealing with just any street thug. Jamal wasn't just some kid who had gotten in the way. He was a part of something bigger. And that made him a threat. Jamal's mind raced. This was it. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and out of time. Marcus's words had been right, if they didn't make a move now, they would be captured. Or worse, killed. But the question was, how? Without thinking, Jamal took a step forward, his feet moving before his brain could catch up. His mind was working on overdrive, trying to figure out an escape, trying to keep his cool. The alley was narrow, but there was one advantage, it was dark. The shadows offered cover, if they could use it right. Listen, Jamal said, his voice louder now, attempting to buy himself a few more seconds. You want us dead? Fine. But you're not going to get what you want out of us. Not unless you kill us right here, right now. The man's lips twisted into a smile. That's the plan, kid. But I think you've made this a little too difficult. And for that, I'm going to enjoy this. The second the words left the man's lips, the world seemed to explode around Jamal. Suddenly, a loud bang rang out from somewhere behind them, a gunshot. The force of it reverberated through Jamal's chest, but it wasn't aimed at him. He turned to see the syndicate members surrounding them drop to the ground, clutching their arms and legs. The sharp sound of another shot filled the air, followed by a third. Move! Marcus barked, grabbing Jamal by the arm and yanking him toward the far side of the alley, away from the chaos. Jamal stumbled, almost tripping over his own feet as he followed Marcus's lead. Another shot rang out, this time hitting the brick wall near their heads. The man from earlier was still standing, his face contorted in rage, but before he could take another shot, a figure emerged from the shadows behind him. Looks like you're not the only one who's persistent, the newcomer said with a smirk. Jamal couldn't believe his eyes. Standing there was his father, striding forward with deadly precision, holding a gun that was aimed directly at the man's chest. The man took a step back, eyes wide, not quite believing what he was seeing. You're dead, the man spat, his hand reaching for his own gun. But before he could pull the trigger, Jamal's father fired, sending the man crashing to the ground in a heap. The alley fell silent, except for the distant sound of sirens approaching, and Jamal found himself staring at his father, heart pounding in his chest. Come on, son, his father said, holstering the gun with practiced ease. We've got to go. Now. Jamal blinked, trying to process everything that had just happened. His father had been here the whole time, waiting, watching, and when the time came, he had stepped in to save them. But it wasn't over yet. Jamal knew that. The threat was still out there, and they weren't out of danger yet. Not by a long shot. Where's Marcus? Jamal asked, his voice shaky. Marcus had disappeared into the shadows after the shooting, but Jamal didn't see him anywhere now. His father shook his head, scanning the area as the sound of sirens grew louder. We're not safe yet, his father said, pulling Jamal along as they moved down the alley, weaving through the shadows toward the side street. Marcus is covering us. We need to go. Fast. But Jamal couldn't help but feel a sense of dread settle in his stomach. Something wasn't right. Where's the team? Jamal asked, his voice tight. They were supposed to be here, weren't they? His father's expression tightened. They'll be here. But we need to move quickly. The alley was eerily quiet now, the sirens growing louder, but there was no sign of the rest of the team. Jamal's gut twisted with anxiety, and for a moment, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. And then, a voice crackled through his earpiece. Jamal. Marcus, the syndicate's moving in fast. We've got trouble. The world seemed to close in on Jamal as he stood in a cold, dark alley with his father, the sirens growing louder in the distance. Every second felt like an eternity, each one thick with tension and fear. He could feel the weight of the night pressing down on him, the choices they'd made, the lives at stake, and the knowledge that the endgame was near. This wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about everything they had fought for. Jamal's heart was still racing, but his mind was shifting into overdrive. The voice in his earpiece crackled again, barely audible through the static. Jamal. Marcus, the syndicate's moving in fast. We've got trouble. They've called reinforcements. Jamal clenched his fists, trying to suppress the panic rising in his chest. His father's voice broke through the haze of confusion. We're not out of this yet, his father said, his tone low but firm. We still have a chance, but we have to stick together. Stay calm. But even as his father spoke, Jamal could feel the pressure mounting. They were being hunted, and the odds were rapidly stacking against them. They had been on the run for so long, first the syndicate's men chasing them through the city, then their brief moment of victory, and now this. The realization hit Jamal like a punch in the gut. They were trapped, with nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. The escape routes were closing fast. He glanced over at his father, watching the steely resolve in his eyes. Jamal had always known his father was tough, had always known he could handle the worst situations with cold precision. But right now, he could see the weariness in his father's eyes. The toll that the war with the syndicate had taken on him was finally starting to show. And for the first time, Jamal wasn't sure his father could carry them both out of this one. The voice crackled again, cutting through the tension. Jamal. Marcus. It was Marcus's voice, rough with static but still clear enough to make Jamal's pulse quicken. I've got eyes on the syndicate's backup. They're coming in fast from the east. If you can make it to the north side, I'll cover you. But we need to move now. They'll be on you in minutes. Jamal's heart skipped. He didn't have time to think. He didn't have time to second guess. He turned to his father. We've got a way out, but we need to go. Marcus is covering us. We have to take the north side. His father nodded, his jaw tightening. We move, now. Without another word, they started running, their footsteps echoing through the alley as they headed toward the northern exit. Jamal's breath came in quick gasps, and the pressure of the situation hit him like a sledgehammer. Every move, every step felt calculated, and yet, deep down, he knew that even the best-laid plans could fail. The syndicate had eyes everywhere, and time was no longer on their side. As they neared the corner of the alley, the sound of gunfire rang out in the distance, sharp and loud. Jamal's blood ran cold. It was too close, far too close. The backup was already closing in. Marcus's voice crackled through the earpiece once more. They're getting close. Move faster, I'm holding them off, but I can't hold them forever. We're almost there, Jamal called out, but his father was already a step ahead, his long strides eating up the distance between them. Jamal kept his head down, watching the shadows ahead of them, every sense on high alert. They reached the corner, and his father pulled up short, gesturing for Jamal to stop. He motioned toward a narrow side street that led out to a less trafficked area, the last potential escape route before the syndicate closed in. Now, his father said, his voice clipped. This way. Stay low. They darted down the side street, sticking close to the walls. The quiet of the night was punctuated by the distant sound of tires screeching and the low hum of a helicopter in the air. The syndicate was not just sending men, they were pulling out all the stops, using everything at their disposal to hunt them down. And the closer they got to the escape route, the clearer it became, if they didn't make it to the extraction point in time, they were as good as dead. Jamal felt the urgency building, a sharp edge of fear cutting through his gut. He could feel his legs burning, his mind buzzing with the weight of the moment. And yet, despite the odds, there was a part of him that couldn't let go of hope. Marcus was out there, still fighting. His father was with him. They were still in this. They reached the street and Jamal saw a familiar face ahead, a member of their team, standing guard at the entrance to a nondescript building. He waved them through, and Jamal felt a rush of relief. But then, everything went wrong. A flash of movement from behind them caught Jamal's eye. He whirled around, his heart dropping into his stomach. A black SUV screeched to a halt at the end of the alley, and before he could even process the situation, the doors burst open. Syndicate soldiers poured out, their weapons drawn, their eyes scanning for targets. "Go!" his father shouted, shoving Jamal forward as gunfire erupted from the distance. Jamal ran, not looking back, but his mind screamed with the knowledge that they were no longer in control. The escape had just turned into a fight for their lives. They made it to the entrance of the building, but they were not alone. Syndicate men were closing in, their footsteps growing louder. And then, the familiar, sharp sound of Marcus's voice came over the earpiece. "Jamal. Your father. They're surrounding you. Now." Jamal's heart nearly stopped. His father had been running behind him, covering their tracks, and now they were cornered. He couldn't leave his father behind, not now, not after everything they'd been through. "Dad!" Jamal screamed, turning back toward the alley. His father was still holding the line, but he was outnumbered. It was too much. Jamal had no choice. He ran back, taking the gun from his father's hands and pushing him out of the way, his heart racing, every step fueled by fear and adrenaline. "We're getting out of here, together." Jamal shouted, his voice breaking, as he pointed the gun at the advancing syndicate soldiers. The threat of death hung in the air. And then, something changed in that moment. In the way Jamal moved. In the way he stood his ground. This wasn't just a fight anymore. It was his stand. The gunfire rang out, but it wasn't him pulling the trigger. Jamal felt the rush of freedom and finality in that one, split-second decision. It was time to choose. He didn't have to fight alone. And now, neither did anyone else. As the dust settled, a silence fell over the alley. There was a finality to it. The syndicate was done. And Jamal, for the first time in his life, truly understood what it meant to stand up for what mattered. The sun rose over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. Jamal stood on the rooftop, looking out over the city that had been the backdrop of his battle, the place that had tested him and his father, his friends, his team. It was over now. The syndicate had fallen, their power crumbled under the weight of their own greed and cruelty. The city was no longer in their grip. But there was still so much to rebuild, so much to repair. Jamal knew the road ahead would be difficult. The scars of the past would never fully fade. But as he looked out over the city, he knew one thing for sure, he had chosen the right side. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?